po sa inyong lahat. Umaga pa lamang, sinusubukan na ng traffic ang pasensya ng ating mga kababayan. Sa tingin ko, kayo mismo ay naramdaman nyo yan kaninang umaga. Paglabas ng kanilang tahanan, mababawasan na ang kanilang kita sapagkat ibabayad nila ito sa tricycle, sa jeep, sa taxi, or sa MRT. Gagastos na nga siya ng pamasahe, mangungunsumi pa sila sa bigat ng trapiko. Dahil sa ganitong sitwasyon, kakailanganin niyang gumising ng maaga, mababawasan ng tulog na halos 2 oras. Dahil kasama sa trapiko ang pagpila sa MRT. Pagkatapos ng trabaho, kailangan niyang suungin muli ang trapiko sa kalsada o pila sa MRT upang makauwi. Anong oras na nakakauwi ang ating mga kababayan? Tayo kasama doon. Anong oras na naman tayo gigising kinabukasan? Ilang oras ang nawawala sa traffic o sa mga pila at aberya sa MRT? Mga oras na sana ay nagagamit nating lahat sa mas produktibong mga bagay. Sa araw-araw na pagod na dinaranas nating lahat, hindi kaya mas lalo tayong magkasakit? Hindi kaya maapektuhan ang ating pagtatrabaho? Hindi kaya naapektuhan na ang ating pakiramdam at pakikitungo sa ating mga kababayan at ang ating pamilya? Nakita natin na mas lalong umiinit ang ulo ng ating mga kababayan. Bakit tayo ang makikisama sa trapiko? Bakit tayo ang magtitiis sa aberya sa MRT? Nakikiusap po ako sa DOTC, MRTC at sa mga iba pang pribadong investors at owners ng MRT-3 na magkasundo po tayo upang matulungan ang ating mga kababayan. So sa araw na ito, pag-aaralan natin hindi lamang ang mga kasalanan natin, kung hindi ang mga solusyon na mas lalong na makakagaan naman sana sa ating mga problema araw-araw sa ating mga kababayan. In our previous hearings, we looked into maintenance issues, the competence or lack thereof of MRT-3's maintenance providers, the DOTC's proposal then of the equity value buyout that will cost us around 54 billion pesos, the apparent lack of proper and efficient communication and interaction among MRTC and the private owners, investors, and the DOTC. Putting things into perspective, the MRT-3 was established as a project between the private sector and government through a build-lease transfer agreement. The BLT contract was awarded to the Metro Rail Transit Corporation. The private sector built or constructed the facilities and remains the owner of the MRT system. The government would lease the system from the MRTC and pay rent to the investors. The government, specifically the DOTC, would operate the system and have control of the fare box. The BLT contract will expire in 2025, and the ownership of the system will then be transferred to the government. For today, the subcommittee will discuss the following. First, the audit report on the MRT, which was completed after our second hearing in October. Second, the issue on maintenance in relation to capacity expansion or asset management to address both the short and long-term viability and reliability of the MRT-3 system. Third, it also bears discussing the status of the new maintenance agreement as well as the reported proposal of Sumitomo in accordance to Mr. Sobrepeña, and that they are willing to return as maintenance providers under the condition that they be allowed to rehabilitate MRT-3 to the tune of around 4 billion pesos, which they are willing to shoulder at no cost to the Philippine government. Of course, I'd also like to hear from you the progress of the bidding for the maintenance, which was supposed to have commenced sometime in October and which was supposed to have closed, but I think you have extended this. Alam niyo po, bagamat komplikado ang kasaysayan ng MRT at ang nilalaman ng diskusyon, simple lang ang gusto nating matalakay ngayon. Una, ang kaligtasan ng ating mananakay. Pangalawa, ang maintenance issue. At pangatlo, na masiguro na hindi masasayang ang pera ng bayan sa pag-rehabilitate nitong MRT-3 at hindi uli tayo masayang at hindi muli masayang ang pera ng gobyerno kung anuman ang mga papasukin nating negosasyon. We shall now resume with the Senate Subcommittee on Public Services hearing on transport issues in consideration of Senate Bill number 2266 on the proposed National Transportation Safety Board authored by this representation, and 3 Senate resolutions regarding MRT-3 accidents and malfunctions authored by Senators Angara, Binay, and Aquino, respectively, with particular focus on MRT-3 issues for today. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of the following, and for you to take time to be here today. I know that everyone is busy preparing for the holidays, but this is a very important issue. First, Yusek Jose Perpetua M. Lutilla. Good morning, sir. Yusek Rene Limcauco. Good morning. Attorney Charissa Eloisa Julia Opulencia. Mr. Alan Roberto M. Adeser, Development Bank of the Philippines. Please raise your hands. Mr. Roberto Sobrepernia, Chairman, Metro Rail Holdings. Sir. Mr. Rogelio Bondo. Morning, sir. Mr. Rafael Perez de Tagle, Mr. David Narvasa, Mr. Roel B. Bacar, Mr. Alan Hortensio, that's Global Inc., and preceding that is PH Shams. Right. Also present is Mr. Victorino Espirito, Manager, Global Inc. Morning, sir. I regret to inform you that Secretary Abaya will not be able to make it today. Am I correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Before we begin with our presentations and discussions, may we ask for the record, Ms. Yusek Lutilla, why your Secretary will not be present today?
Madam Chair, the Secretary po is in an emergency meeting involving Terminal 3 po, Madam Chairman.
I would like to give the Secretary the benefit of the doubt. I'm sure that he knows full well what's going on in the agency, but I'm sure that he will not discount the importance also of this hearing. So would you know further why this emergency was scheduled today and primarily what the discussions will be, why he couldn't make it?
Madam Chair, I believe it's because the main contractors were doing the completion works of Terminal 3, Takenaka, and the one supervising Incheon Corporation of South Korea are here today, Madam Chair, and that's the reason.
Thank you, but in fact, our meeting should have been scheduled last week, but because of Typhoon Ruby, and we know that the DOTC has a lot of concerns for rehabilitation, we postponed our hearing for this hearing today. And I was hoping that since you were given technically 2 weeks' notice, if there was a hearing, if you had a meeting that was more pressing than this, that you could have informed us. I'm sure you would have known about this at least 2 or 3 days before. Because all of us are also busy preparing for the holidays, it would have been nice to have the head of the agency explain, but he has full confidence in you. In the interest of full disclosure, I spoke to him earlier. He also explained, but I wanted you to explain this for the record. He also said that there's some discussion about the MRT-3 right after. I just was wondering why he couldn't be here, because this is also a discussion about that. On the other hand, as I mentioned, he has full confidence in both of you and that you will be able to answer on his behalf. So I wouldn't, I hope that you will avoid, having to defer your answers for later on, because my intention is really to adjourn this meeting and not just to suspend it. But depending on how this will go, how our discussions will go, we might have to suspend it because the Secretary is not present here today. So to begin, Yusek Lutilla, we have a presentation before we ask you to do your presentations. Our presentation is from our Commuter's report. Now, the reason why I have this, I have a report from the MTR. This is not from your office, but I do have it. I will explain my source later on. But I think that we should really hear primarily from our passengers. So dapat marinig natin ang tunay na kalagayan na dinaranas nila araw-araw. So ang ginawa ko, yung mga kasamahan namin sa trabaho, ay binigyan ko ng questionnaire kung ano yung mga naranasan nila sa pagsakay sa MRT. At ito po ang kanilang report. Ito po, sumakay po sila during rush hour sa umaga para po masiguro natin na yun pong talagang eksaktong oras kung saan napakaraming pasahero ang sumasakay sa MRT. Ito po yung mga MRT stations. Hindi po lahat, meron tayong, lahat po halos actually meron tayong report. North Avenue, Quezon Avenue, Kamuning, Cubao, Santolan, Ortigas, Shaw, Boni, Guadalupe, Buendia, Ayala, Magallanes staff. Meron po tayong 6 aspects for inspection. Queue, yung linya, comfort rooms, mga banyo, escalator, elevator, ease of travel, comfort while riding, ibig sabihin yung kanilang karanasan, air conditioning system, at yung total riding experience. So, umpisahan po natin sa queue. So, yung haba ng pila. Sa North Avenue po, ang kanilang report, alam naman natin ito, pero for the record lang po, mahaba pa rin po ang mga pila connecting bridge between Trinoma and MRT stations. Quezon Avenue, the line extends out of the station. GMA Kamuning, line extends out of the station and into the road. Cubao, lines are short and moving. Santolan, Annapolis, fairly fast queuing due to minimal riders, 15 minutes dito sa Annapolis. Ortigas, line extends out of the station. Shaw Boulevard, it takes an hour and a half to ride the train during rush hours. Boni Avenue takes about 40 minutes to get into the train. Guadalupe, the queue extends from stairs to the EDSA sidewalk. Buendia, line is moving steadily. Ayala, very long lines as early as 6 a.m. and 15 minutes travel time, but it takes 2 hours or more to board the train. Magallanes, long queue, 55 minutes in line. And Taft Avenue, line extends until the stairs, which are packed with customers, and the average waiting time is 30 to 40 minutes. Now, next slide, please. So these are some of the pictures that we took. About an hour and a half to ride the train in Shaw Boulevard. And then the heavy line took 30 minutes to be on MRT's first stair step. This is in Quezon Avenue. So 30 minutes to the steps pa lang. Line moves and stops every 15 minutes or longer. Next, in Quezon Avenue Station, they installed tolda tents that serve as shade to passengers, but it is not enough to cover all waiting commuters. I remember we discussed this before upon the suggestion of Senator Recto, and you agreed to put that, but so far we only have it in Quezon Avenue. We also discussed the possibility of maybe loaner umbrellas, but so far this is what we have. Now, this is where the situation becomes despicable when it comes to our comfort rooms. North Avenue, foul smelling from the comfort rooms. Quezon Avenue, urinal flush not functioning. Toilet bowls are filthy and faucets barely have running water. So masamang-masama pong kondisyon ng ating mga banyo. Madumi, hindi man nagfa-flush, kulang ng tubig. GMA Kamuning, quite clear. Cubao, 2 cubicles, but the flush is not working and the comfort room for women is filthy. Santolan, Annapolis, fairly clean. Ortigas, clean cubicles, rates 5 out of 10, so average. Shaw Boulevard, clean cubicles. Boni Avenue, dirty. Guadalupe, a bit dirty, not well maintained. Buendia, not well maintained, mahina ang tubig. Ayala, there should be additional comfort rooms because there are only 2 cubicles available to the number of commuters. Magallanes, clean cubicles. Taft Avenue, No sign for comfort rooms. Anyway, here's a picture of your comfort room in Cubao Station. Please look at it. Look at the tiles on the wall. Look at the sign. And then there's even a pail of water. Now, why are we discussing urinal flush not functioning? And next slide. Toilet bowls are filthy and faucets barely have running water, as I mentioned in Quezon Avenue Station. Why are we mentioning this? This is not a trivial matter. Everybody has to use the bathroom at some point, as much as we have to take transport. The bathroom shows how we value our customers. It shows also how we uphold the dignity of the passengers. How will we educate our people, our passengers, about hygiene and cleanliness if our public facilities are not even well maintained? This is unacceptable. I don't think it takes so much money to rehabilitate that or to assign a person there to clean all the time. And since you are in charge of maintenance, the OTC is liable for this. We cannot blame a third party or the investors for this. Next slide, please. Now we will go to the escalators and elevators. North Avenue. Escalators not working, elevators functioning but is rickety and slow moving. Quezon Avenue. Escalator not working, elevator is out of order. Kamuning, unnoticeable because of the long queue. Cubao, elevator is old and rickety. Santolan, Annapolis, no escalator, elevator is working. Ortigas, elevator is working. Shaw Boulevard, working escalator, elevator is cramped and rickety. Bonnie Avenue, working escalator. Guadalupe, escalator not operational. Buendia, escalators working. Ayala, working elevator. Magallanes, escalator not working. Taft Avenue, escalator not working. Picture, please. Next slide. Look at this. The elevator seems so old, dirty, and rickety once you're inside. It feels scary because it seems like it would break down anytime. Taft Station. Look at the cover on the elevator pad, wrapped in saran wrap. Here's a picture of the escalator on Quezon Avenue. The next slide. And then persons with disability elevator in Cubao Station, out of order. Ease of travel. So we've seen that, we know that. Kulang yung safety handrails na hawakan sa biyahe. Commuter traveling from North Station. Air conditioning inside the train. Temperature is satisfactory. The aircon is turned off or weak because it cannot handle the passenger volume. It will only start getting cool once we reach Magallanes, second to the last station. The air conditioning cannot handle the volume of people. The air conditioning units of the trains work like mere fans that barely blow out air. Aircon is always on, barely working. Overall implementation failed in terms of safety and ease, but like most commuters, I don't have a choice but to ride the MRT to avoid the traffic. From queuing to getting the ticket to entering the platform to getting in and out of the train, everything is beyond worse. So here's the report card. Actually, also even the fare collecting system, there's also a problem with it. So the MRT station's report card, based on our riders, and we have one in every station, will use the UP grading system, one being the highest. Quezon Avenue, North Avenue gets 3. Quezon Avenue 4, so that's almost failing. GMA Kamuning, fail, 5. Cubao, fail. Santolan, Annapolis, 2.75. Ortigas, 4. Shaw Boulevard, 5. Bonnie Avenue, 4. Guadalupe, 4. Buendia, 3. Ayala, 2.5. Magallanes, 2.5. Taft Avenue, 5. An average of 3.8. Now, Ladies and gentlemen, why am I presenting this? Because we have to hear first and foremost from our commuters, our passengers. Yes, we have an MTR report, but that may be on the technical side. Exactly how the experience is, maybe there's no emotional factor in the report of the MTR. That's why we presented this. And I think that we had to tackle this because during our last meeting, it was already our concern, the escalators and the elevators. And until now, there's still a problem with that. Even your comfort rooms, that would have been the easiest thing to tackle. Because if you wanted to show your seriousness in taking care of our passengers, it would have been easy to assign somebody or two people. How much is the minimum wage a day? How much are you collecting? And the government pays subsidies for this. So I would like to hear from you, who is with operations? Is it you, Yusek Latilia, or Yusek Limcauco?
Madam Chair, the one in operations is really Director San Jose.
Okay, may I ask you, Mr. San Jose, what is the reason behind this?
Tungkol po sa mga CR, magandang umaga po sa inyo. Totoo po na ang aming mga CR ay dilapidated na gawa po na magmula po nung ito ay nagawa noong 1999 hanggang sa ngayon ay wala pa po ni isang rehabilitation na nagawa. Tungkol naman po sa tubig, totoo po yun na kung minsan may problema po sa supply ng tubig at hindi po sapat yung naisusupply na tubig ng ating provider para po maging malakas ang pressure sa tubig, lalo na po sa mga taas na parte ng istasyon. Tungkol naman po sa mga maintenance na janitor po ay meron po tayong nakatalaga na isang janitor bawat oras po na umaandar po yung MRT na nakatalaga po sa loob ng CR para po siya ay maglinis. Kaya lang po talaga po, Madam Senator, ay kapag rush hour po ay wala po tayong magawa dahil po talaga pong overwhelming po yung ating mga pasahero at kahit na po nga pagpasok sa CR ay mahirap dahil hindi na rin po matutukan ng maayos. Totoo po yun. Hindi po namin pinakakaila na talaga pong napakasiksikan po sa MRT dahil nga po sa ngayon ang ating pong speed ay na-reduce from 65 kilometers per hour ay naging 40 po ngayon dahil po sa safety concerns. Ang ibig pong sabihin yan, dati po na kaya natin mag-transport ng 23,640 passengers per hour per direction, per peak direction. Ngayon po ay nasa 17,700 na lang po ang kaya nating mag-transport ng mga pasahero dahil po yan sa pag-reduce po ng speed ng tren. Maliban po doon, dahil nga po na rin sa yung ating pong mga tren ay nangangailangan na rin po ng overhauling, ay yung ating pong availability sa ngayong buwan hanggang ngayon pong buwan ng December 1 to December 15 ay umaabot lamang po sa about 17 trains during peak hours and about 14.8 or 9 during off-peak hours. So ito po, ang lahat ng ito ay nagko-contribute po sa mga inconvenience po na nararamdaman po ng ating mga pasahero. At ang maaari lamang po na maging solusyon dito ay ang pag-rehabilitate po ng mga riles, ang pagdagdag po ng mga bagon, at ang pag-rehabilitate po ng mga CR na sa ngayon po ay merong project ang DOTC na matagal-tagal na pong hindi pa natatapos na ma-implement. Yung po yung rehabilitasyon ng lahat ng mga CR sa lahat po ng transport facilities ng DOTC.
Salamat po, Mr. San Jose. Opo, hindi po talaga hindi ninyo kasalanan kasi ito dahil nadatnan na rin po ninyo yan. At maraming salamat sa inyong tapat na salaysay ukol dito. Ilan po yung ating cubicles bawat banyo?
Sa atin pong mga estasyon, maliliit po yung ating cubicle. Meron po tayong isang cubicle po sa naihian para sa CR ng mga lalaki at isang meron no yung pwedeng dumumi. Ganun din sa mga babae po, isa rin lang yan. Kasi po ang ating pong CR na panlalaki, pambabae at PWD, tag-iisa po yun sa bawat istasyon at isa rin po sa bawat bound. Meaning, ibig pong sabihin nun, 3 sa northbound, 3 rin po sa southbound sa bawat istasyon po natin.
So, ganun lang po. Pero yun po ay kasama, sabi nyo, since 1999. So, kasama po yan sa design na sinumite ng grupo na nagpagawa nito. Tama po ba?
Opo. Magmula po nung nagawa yung mga istasyon ng MRT, ayan na po yung itsura ng ating mga
So, ito yung design na sinabit ng grupo po ninyo, Mr. Sobrepeña?
Sorry, ma'am. On the restroom, these are the original designs. Yes.
There was no foresight on the number of passengers that would have used the MRT?
In transit stations, normally people should be in and out of there within minutes. It's not really a place that people should dwell on for hours as they do now. This is something that was never envisioned in the design. People should be in and out in minutes.
So I understand. So there was lack of vision on that part, because I feel that any train station should have at least many. I mean, just like an airport, you don't intend to stay in the bathroom for long, but then emergencies do happen. So I think this is something that we really need to look into. But my suggestion is, I think, Mr. San Jose, mas mabuti na ngang isara muna yung banyo na yan. Pwede maglagay ng temporary, yung para sa construction site. In the meantime, na i-rehabilitate ninyo yung banyo for emergency, meron naman dapat, dun sa baba pa lang ng train, meron na yung sa mga construction, ewan ko kung anong tawag dun, mga portalets pala, mga portalets, pwede maglagay. Habang isara ninyo yan, para dagdagan ninyo, ewan ko kung anong pwedeng gawin. Meron po sa budget natin ngayon, na inapruba ang Senate Committee on Finance. Gusto ko mamaya i-detalye ninyo kung saan mapupunta yan. Sa tingin ko, high priority. In the meantime, pwede po bang mag-request, Mr. San Jose? Alam ko, mahirap po yung trabaho ninyo dahil sa dami ng pasahero. Pero pwede bang magtalaga ng hindi lang isa, kundi dalawa pang nagbabantay sa mga CR? Damihan po ninyo ang cleaning aid ninyo, at meron nga nabibili na pag nag-flash, may lalabas na naglilinis, no? Ngayon, baliwala lahat yan kung wala kayong tubig. So, dun sa matataas ang stasyon, dapat maglagay po kayo ng motor. Kung ang mga bahay ay nakakapaggawa ng remedyo para magkaroon ng tubig, magkano lang ba ang motor para lagyan ng tubig ang CR na may 2 o 3 cubicle, di ba? Kaya po ba yan, Mr. San Jose? May motor po ba kayo? Wala.
Meron po, ma'am. Ang kailangan po namin sa ngayon na kasama po dun sa gagawin na pag-upgrade po ng mga banyo ay yung pong storage tank ng mga stasyon. Kasi po yung motor, kahit po minsan ay tumatakbo, kung kulang din po yung nasisip-sip na tubig mula po sa source, ay kulang pa rin po ang maibubuga. Kaya ang napag-isipan po namin, maglagay po ng mga storage facilities ng tubig dun mismo sa stasyon para po kung hindi gaanong mahina ang tubig, ay makakapag-ipon po muna ng tubig at maipapanik po ito dun sa ating mga water tanks.
Pwede po bang gawing prioridad yan kaya ng DOTC, maglagay na ng mga tangke? Pero nabibiling tangke na nga nayari na eh. Di ba? So, ipapatong na lang, i-reconfigure para dun sa plumbing ninyo. Secretary Yusek Lotilla?
Opo, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, with your indulgence po.
Yes, sir.
Siguro po, pwede ko lang po masabi at the moment po na itong maintenance po kasi ng mga estasyon po, kasi po ma'am, under the BLT contract po kasi, ang maintenance po kasi, na responsibilidad po kasi yan ng MRTC po mula nung umpisa po ng kontrata.
Pero kinuha po ninyo, di po ba?
Yes, ma'am. But ibig ko lang po sabihin, ma'am, na itong mga bagay po na note nyo po, no, na deterioration and all that po, nandyan na po kasi yan, nasa kondisyon na po ng sistema po yun, ma'am, before even we came in. Kasi 12 years po, ma'am, maintain yan ng MRTC. It was only because they refused po to procure the maintenance contractor. That was the only time po that we came in.
I understand what you're saying, sir. A lot of it are structures that were present in 1999, so it's very difficult, and continued investment is necessary for the maintenance and upgrade of the MRT system. However, in the meantime, that we have all of these problems going on, and you were the ones that procured the maintenance provider now, we should have Band-Aid solutions. Of course, it's not nice to listen. It's not nice to hear Band-Aid, diba? But we can do that in parallel with our plans for long-term solutions. So, in the meantime, habang, binibili pa ninyo yung tangke, inaayos pa ninyo yung CR, dadagdagan nyo ng stalls, siguro naman dapat magdagdag tayo ng portalet sa baba, o kaya po yung mga tao na magme-maintain, sabihin nyo dito sa maintenance provider, dagdagan nila ng tao para maglinis. Pero yung tubig, napaka-importante po niyan kahit nasaan. Sabihin na natin kasalanan nila. Hindi ko sinasabing kasalanan ninyo, Mr. Sobrepeña. Sabihin na natin kasalanan nila. Pero sa ngayon po, hindi tayo pwede magturuan. Nasa inyo po ang bola. The ball is in your court to be able to do, that you should be able to do that. So, let's secure the tank for the water. In the meantime that you cannot totally rehabilitate, let's put more people to clean that place. And then we should also, with the money that you will get for next year's budget, perhaps you should really consider closing down that toilet and then adding new stalls and just adding portalets. And then next report, for your escalators and elevators, what is the problem? Why is it still not working completely? Mr. San Jose.
Salamat po, ma'am. Totoo po yun na karamihan po sa mga elevator at escalator ay hindi po tumatakbo. Ang MRT po ay merong dalawang uri ng elevator at saka escalator. Yung isa pong grupo ay mga Schindler elevators at yung isa naman po ay mga Mitsubishi elevators and escalators.
Ano po yung una?
Schindler po. Schindler.
Schindler?
Opo.
Okay, yung isa Mitsubishi.
Opo.
Okay.
So, magmula po nung na-construct yung MRT nung 1997 to 1999, siya na po yung mga facilities na naandyan. Ngayon po, dahil nga po sa 15 years na po ito, nangangailangan na po talaga ng major rehabilitation or replacement po ng mga ito. Kasi po, kahit na yung elevator ay tumatakbo pa naman, meron po siyang mga component parts na nagiging mahalaga, subalit ay hindi na po napapalitan o nare-repair on component level.
Ngayon po, let me cut you off for a moment, Mr. San Jose. Have you assessed already? Have you asked Schindler and Mitsubishi to make an assessment of what is needed to rehabilitate? How long it will take and how much?
Ma'am, meron na po kaming ginawa na pakikipag-usap sa Mitsubishi at saka sa Schindler. Yung pong Schindler mismo na kumpanya dito sa Pilipinas. At meron na po silang sinabit na rehabilitation plan ng lahat po ng escalator at elevator na Schindler.
Opo,
at kaya nga po ito ay nakasama na po doon sa na-propose po namin na budget for 2015. At kasama rin po doon sa 2014 na supplemental budget, diyan naman po ay para doon sa repair at rehabilitation or modernization po ng mga Mitsubishi elevators at escalators po natin.
That's good news. Actually, sa Yusek Lutilia, nakausap ko po si Senator Cheese at sabi niya dun sa inyong budget daw for 2015, talagang sinabi niya to specify elevators, escalators. Am I correct?
Opo, Madam Chair.
Can you tell me exactly how much that is, how long it will take, when will it start?
Ang total na budget po sa 2015 ay 50 million at doon po sa supplemental another 50 million o for a total of 100 million pesos po, ma'am. At ito po ay mangyayari po within the third quarter of 2015. Kasi po yung paggawa po ng pag-rehabilitate po ng mga elevator at escalator ay aabutin po ng 6 to 8 months.
Babalik po tayo dito in 6 to 8 months para matukoy kung ito nga'y nagawa na.
Opo, ma'am.
Mag-uumpisa po kayo, kailan po? January?
January po, ma'am, ipapublish po yung ating bidding documents para po dito.
Ay, bidding pa lang.
Opo, ma'am.
Teka muna, Schindler Mitsubishi, ang gagawa hindi Schindler at Mitsubishi?
Yung po, ma'am, kasi na meron tayo na for rehabilitation ng Mitsubishi at saka ng Schindler, yun po sila mismo. Kaya lang po, meron tayong mga area or elevator na kinakailangan po ng total systems replacement. Pag total systems replacement po kasi, ma'am, ang matitira na lang dyan yung elevator pits. So yung pong mechanism ay open for public bidding po yun kasi pwede pong at iba't ibang brand. Subalit po, yung mga for rehabilitation and modernization, kung sino po yung dating may-ari niya o binilihan po natin, siya rin po natin kukunin.
Malinaw po yan, ha? Kung sinong gagawa ng ano at hindi magkakasalungat yan. Kasi ang problema nito, sasabihin ng isa, hindi, kasi rehabilitate namin pero mali naman yung component na pinasok ng isa. Meron po kayong engineer sa DOTC, kayo po ba yon na talagang sisiguro na magkatugma ang rehabilitation nyo, repair nung mga sistema na to?
Actually po ma'am, what we did para po sa makita namin yung buong problema, maliban po dun sa mga engineer natin, ay tinawag po muna natin yung mga engineer mismo at technicians ng Mitsubishi at saka ng Schindler. So nagkaroon po tayo ng joint inspection at sila rin po ay pumunta at tiningnan po yung lahat ng parameters ng sistema natin at sila po yung nag-propose kung ano po ang dapat gawin dito para po maibalik sa original na kondisyon.
Okay po yun. Basta yung proposal nila. Kaya lang kung hindi silang gagawa, iba yung warranty system nila. Okay lang, I mean, kailangan lang pag-aralan mabuti. Kasi po, magbibid din po kayo ng maintenance, hindi po ba? Kailan ba yung bidding ninyo? Mag-umpisa next year? Yusek Lutilia?
Ma'am, actually po, Madam Chair, nag-fail lang po yung first bidding po doon sa maintenance po. And so, we had to conduct po one-on-one meetings with the interested bidders po, ma'am. And they suggested certain changes po sa terms of reference. Because basically po, Madam Chair, ang problem po kasi sa maintenance po kasi ang sistema po nung kontrata, they have to provide a certain number of trains po for the system. And ang isang problem po kasi dyan is because of the state of the entire system po, na kailangan po ng maraming rehabilitation po work that has to be done. Ang problema po, nahihirapan po yung bidders to quantify the risk that they have to undertake po. And that's the reason why hindi ho sila, kumbaga ho, nag-bid in the first bidding because sabi nila, hindi ho nila masisiguro na kikita pa po sila kung mag-bid sila.
Panay po ang iling ni Mr. Sobrepeña. Meron po kayong gustong idagdag, maikli, bago tayo pumunta dito sa... Kasi pag aaralan din natin yan Sumitomo mamaya, pero baka meron po kayong idadagdag.
Yes, Madam Chair. I just want to add something to this. No, it's very hard to get a maintenance provider who will maintain a broken down system that is in dire need of rehab. There is no way any maintenance provider will take over this system because what it needs is a complete rehab, and then you can get a maintenance provider to maintain a fixed and rehab system, which is why I have always been espousing again and again the maintenance provider must also undertake the complete rehab of the system and then go back to a single point of responsibility so that that maintenance provider can guarantee that system entirely, back to guarantee. Unless the maintenance provider is responsible for the rehab, you will never go back to the single point of responsibility. Magiging chap-chap na yan. Magkakaturuan na yan. Whoever did the rail will point to the guy who did the bogey will point to the guy who did the signaling, turuan na yan. You'll never have a single point of responsibility. That is the main problem with the system.
And Sumitomo is willing?
Yes, ma'am.
And this is what they told you?
Yes, and I have a proposal here with
And
me.
this is, have you heard from Sumitomo, Yusek Lotilia?
No, Madam Chair. It's the first time that we're hearing it.
But apparently he has a copy of the letter. And also, it bothers me why, from the time we met, there's been some improvement, but I wouldn't even say it's an improvement. Apparently, Mr. Sobrepeña wrote you a letter and you responded. And in that letter, after you responded, he wanted to set a meeting, but from that time until now, you haven't met face-to-face. What is causing the delay, sir? Do you have any apprehensions, trepidations? What is it?
Wala naman po, Madam Chair, because in fact, we sent a letter reply po to Mr. Sobrepeña asking po for the setting of a date po when the proposal can be presented po. Because my problem po, Madam Chair, is legal po ako, Madam Chair. So, I mean, I have to ask the planning guys, the technical guys po to be present po when the presentation is made. I'm afraid my competence has its limits, Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sure you're very competent, sir, in your field. On the other hand, I don't think it's very difficult to gather the heads of your different departments, especially when it is a very pertinent issue like this one. And this is a long-standing issue between both of you. So I hope that you will schedule your hearing soon. Before you leave, I would like you to talk. If you can call Secretary Abaya and ask when he's free after the holidays. On the other hand, if we're really conscious about the safety issue, we should do this as soon as possible, even during the holidays. But okay, you decide on that. It's all in your hands. Even, again, if something happens also to our commuters, of course, it will all be in our hands. So I think we should take this seriously. So now I would like to go to our... we received a copy of the final version of the assessment survey of the MRT-3 system. This was conducted by MTR Hong Kong and was provided to our office by the law firm of Suarez and Narvasa on behalf of their client Metro Rail Transit Holdings II, or MRTH Holding. Now, I will not go through the entire report. Let me ask before I begin, do you have a copy of this report, Yusa Clotilia?
I understand, Madam Chair, that the copy was received by the department yesterday late in the afternoon po, Madam Chair. I don't have a copy personally po.
Okay, then let me share with you some of the highlights of the final report. The MTR Hong Kong was commissioned to perform an assessment survey of various asset systems. So it's either good, satisfactory, fair, unsatisfactory, or poor. So next slide, please. Track work, poor and unacceptable. I think this is like almost the arteries of the system. I mean, so that is quite alarming, because all the trains obviously have to pass through the tracks. Rolling stock, unsatisfactory. Signaling system, fair. Communication system, PA system, satisfactory. PABX system, fair. Radio system, satisfactory. CCTV system, unsatisfactory. Do you even have a CCTV system, Mr. San Jose?
Magandang umaga po, ma'am. Again. Meron po kami, kasi nung na-construct po yung MRT facilities, ay meron po siyang kasama na mga CCTV facilities na ang purpose po noon para po makita ng driver yung mga pasahero na sumasakay at bumaba sa likod ng tren. Nung mga 2008 or 2009, nagkaroon po ng pagdagdag ng mga CCTV camera na ang purpose naman po noon ay para po makita yung kalagayan ng mga platform at iba po pong premises ng istasyon. So, dalawa pong CCTV system ang naka-install po ngayon para po i-monitor yung ganung kalagayan ng MRT.
So gumagana naman po?
Meron po yung sa first generation po ng mga CCTV, meron na pong mga CCTV na medyo iba na po yung kulay at yung iba naman po ay medyo hindi na gaanong malinaw.
Opo, kasi alam niyo po, di ba maraming nasisira. Kunyari sabihin, nasira yung connection dito ng track. Dapat may CCTV para makita. Hindi ko naman sinasabi, pero we should discount any possibility of sabotage. For example, especially when we're having so much issues with the MRT, the maintenance providers should be able to pinpoint exactly what happened. Wala bang pumuntang tao doon, pinaglaruan, o may ginawa doon sa track system. I mean, may mga nagsasabi po kasi sa akin, itong track na to, hindi basta-basta masisira yan eh. May mga kung ano-anong bolts o kung ano-anong nakahawak dyan sa track system na yan, kung nasira pa. So, dapat matukoy, kung dito nasira sa point na to, pag-aralan ninyo, within 24 hours, ano ba nangyari dun sa lugar na yon. So, dapat talaga, kahit dun sa mga dinadaanan ng train, meron kayong CCTV. So, yung isa naman, aircon, fair, as elevators, poor. Escalators, poor and unacceptable. Aircon, fair. Fire prevention, fair. Other station facilities, fair. Power supply, satisfactory. Next slide, please. So the overall assessment is poor and unacceptable for the track work. Broken rail cases. The number of broken rail cases has increased fourfolds over the past 3 years. Coincidentally, that was the time that you had a different maintenance provider. Broken rail leads to serious threat to safety and may cause train derailment, resulting to substantial casualties in a high-usage system like the MRT-3. Rolling contact fatigue, RCF. This is the type of defect was found all along the rail lines. So I can go on and on with this, but I would like to ask, Mr. Lutilla, kanino po ba kayo humingi ng audit report? Kasi mukhang hindi ito nanggaling sa inyo. Kanino po galing, may I ask, Mr. Sobrepena, who commissioned this report?
It's MRTC, ma'am.
Your company?
Yes, the private company.
Okay, may I ask, Mr. Lutilla, what initiatives did you have to have an independent audit report? If you did not commission MTR, why didn't you commission them? Or did you commission another company of comparative credibility and reputation?
Madam Chair, actually, as early as 2009, Madam Chair, SISTRA had conducted an audit of the system, Madam Chair, and the findings of SISTRA, Madam Chair, were there, and the findings actually showed that there were already system defects, Madam Chair, and that these system defects should be addressed, and that was really this was during the entire time when Sumitomo was doing all of the works, Madam Chair, and the Sumitomo contract includes everything, Madam Chair, the rail replacement, heavy rail grinding. These are all included in the maintenance contract, Madam Chair. But unfortunately, until 2012, Madam Chair, these things were not addressed adequately, Madam Chair.
May I ask, sir, when was this SISTRA audit done, since you said it was during the time of Sumitomo?
If I recall correctly, Madam Chair, it was around 2008, 2009.
Now,
Madam Chair.
during your administration, did you commission any audits?
Madam Chair, there were several times when the engineers of both LRT and MRT conducted their own survey of the system, Madam Chair. And in fact, the MRTC commissioning of MTR Hong Kong is actually something that was agreed upon with the OTC. And in fact, if one looks at the structure of the contract, Madam Chair, the OTC pays $41,000 a month to MRTC in order for MRTC to precisely commission experts and all that to conduct audits from time to time. And actually, Madam Chair, that's I think the thing that we sort of glide over from time to time is the fact, Madam Chair, that during this entire 12-year period, the contract is very clear. It's maintenance, even for the entire 25 years. Maintenance is a responsibility of the owner, MRTC. It has never been a responsibility.
So may I ask, sir, why you assumed it? Why did you take it from them?
Madam Chair, may I just recount the circumstances?
Go ahead, sir. And before I forget, sir, you said you pay them about $41,000 to conduct a survey. I would like to see exactly remittance of that amount, and if there's a stipulation for that remittance, because Mr. Sobrepena here seems to be disagreeing. But go ahead, sir, with whatever else you have to add, and I will ask Mr. Sobrepena to account for that $41,000 allegedly being paid to them for that precise reason of having an audit. Sir, go ahead, please.
Madam Chair, this entire system under the original BLT contract, the maintenance is a responsibility of MRTC. And so, for the first 10 years of the contract, from 2000 to 2010, Sumitomo Corporation was commissioned to be the maintenance contractor. But what happened was after somewhere around 2010, we understand, there was no further bidding of the contract. When nag-expire na po kasi in 2010 yung Sumitomo contract na original po. So what happened was MRTC extended the Sumitomo contract for 6 months po. For, I think, 4 extensions. 4 po, Madam Chair. So, parang roughly 2 years po sila nag-extend. Now, ang nangyari po kasi, Sumitomo was asking po kasi for an escalation of the maintenance contract price. Because the maintenance contract price was around 1.43 million US dollars. 1.43 million dollars.
A month, sir.
A month po, Madam Chair, for the first 10 years. But they asked for an escalation of around 800,000 US dollars po. And they, of course, $800,000 a month po, Your Honor. So Sumitomo was asking for an additional $800,000 a month.
This includes maintenance and rehabilitation, correct?
Ma'am, because the maintenance contract actually speaks of maintenance, and we would have presumed that it includes heavy maintenance and as well as the parts po of the system that were needed to maintain it. Because I think the one thing also, ma'am, that perhaps should be stressed is that the findings of MTR Hong Kong are predicated on the theory that you are positing they are positing their findings against the design parameters, that this entire system was designed to run at a certain speed, at a certain... So, kumbaga po, it's against that background na yung analysis po nila ginawa nila. Now, in 2010, Sumitomo po wanted to increase the rates.
Siyempre, may inflation na eh. So I understand that. But anyway, go ahead, sir.
Opo. Well, ang po, ma'am, I think ang nangyari na hindi po sila nakuha po yun, and then they gave a deadline in 2012. They gave a deadline po. They said, oh, if you do not increase the maintenance contract to $2.23 million a month, and you do not free us from any responsibility for... They were now pointing to certain systems that they said, kumbaga po, kailangan na to ng rehab. So they said, we will not be responsible for these systems anymore. But in order for us to continue the maintenance contract, we have to be paid $2.23 million a month. Yun po ang nangyari dyan. So, what happened was, we were given po a deadline, and MRTC wrote to us and said, we are not going to be the ones to procure the maintenance contractor anymore. And so we wrote to MRTC, and we told MRTC in no uncertain terms that their failure to maintain the system would be a breach of their contract.
Sir, let me cut you off. So the payment that was given to Sumitomo in the 10 years that they were there was being paid by MRTC. Am I correct?
No, ma'am. Under the terms of the contract po, even though responsibility for maintenance was with MRTC, the one who was paying was government, DOTC po, ma'am.
So I would like to ask them why Okay, go ahead. Maybe, why wouldn't they want to continue with Sumitomo earlier on? It was DOTC's decision. Why did you give it to DOTC now to decide? Is that true, Mr. Sobrepeña?
Can I explain, ma'am? Ma'am, first of all, the relationship with DOTC and MRTC is almost like a partnership. MRTC can recommend, but DOTC must approve, always. Whether it's capacity expansion, whether it's the procurement of a maintenance provider. Now, in April of 2010, as early as April of 2010, MRTC wrote DOTC, and I have the letter here, by the way, if in case I'll submit it to you, ma'am, that MRTC is ready to procure a new maintenance provider, April of 2010. And
DOTC said this?
No, MRTC, our
That you are-
company.
okay.
That we wrote DOTC that we are ready to procure a new maintenance provider. As a matter of fact, we proposed a 5-year maintenance contract for $86 million starting 2010, ending $86 million over 5 years at $1.4 million per month. This was in 2010, April. The reason it was April, the Sumitomo contract would expire its 10th year on July of 2010, which is why April would give us 3 months to bid. DOTC did not act on this. They did not act on it for 2 years. I have the letter here, and there was never any reply from DOTC. We should have had a new 5-year contract from 2010 to 2015, and we were proposing to bid it out. We had the price, we were ready. We said our committee had approved it, our board had approved it. They did not reply. All of a sudden, well, between 2010 and 2012, DOTC wrote us, and we have all the letters here, recommending the extension every 6 months of Sumitomo. In 29, there was a Sistra is a consultant of DOTC, ma'am. Sistra made a study, and we have the study right here with us, if you want to look at it, and it basically says that the system is substantially satisfactory and complete. And that was the basis for the extension, the continuous extension of Sumitomo. We have a copy of that report, and Sistra itself said they were very satisfied with Sumitomo, which is the reason they recommended the extension every 6 months. And which is why DOTC wrote us, we have it here in writing, the extension of Sumitomo every 6 months. So when it came to 2012, all of a sudden, 12 days prior to the end or expiration of the Sumitomo contract in 2012, GM Vitangol came to the MRTC board, these two gentlemen were there, and basically said, 12 days from the expiration, please bid out the maintenance contract. Now, how on earth are you going to bid out a maintenance contract in 12 days? There was no way. So MRTC said, why are you only telling us 12 days prior to the expiration? You should have told us that 3 months ago. We asked you 2 years ago to bid it out. Now, 12 days before the expiration, you come and say this. So what the MRTC said was, we cannot bid it out in 12 days. We cannot do an honest-to-goodness bid in 12 days. As a matter of fact, what we want is extend Sumitomo another 6 months, and then we'll bid it out. DOTC went ahead and appointed PH Trams. Ma'am, that's a real story. So, and, you know, all this finger-pointing and history, I think this is all part of the previous records and previous hearings we have had. But all I want to say is this. There is one simple truth here. It came from a qualified and financially capable maintenance provider that had run the system well and efficiently for 12 years. This was never in the news. There were never any major incidents. That's why I say no news is good news for the MRT. And that was the case for 12 years. People rode it, they got home, they got back, they went to work, no news. And in 2012, that changed. And that was the problem. And this is, you know, we may say all these things, but this is really the problem, ma'am. Bottom line. It was given to a maintenance provider under a parts and service contract. The service was rendered, but no parts were given. There were no, the maintenance provider who took this over, PH Rams, ATP Global, did not supply the parts required to maintain this system. I would like to put on record that when Sumitomo turned over this system to PH Trams in 2012, I have here all the parts that they turned over, including 122 pieces of rail, brand new rail pieces, 122 pieces. Now, I would like to ask, how many pieces does the maintenance provider now have? I've learned this from the past hearings, 0. They have not one single rail in their inventory. When Sumitomo turned this over, after 12 years of maintaining it, they had on stock all these parts plus 122 pieces of rail. Today, there are no parts. There are no rails. That is the problem. That's the bottom line, ma'am. That's really the bottom line.
The single point of responsibility, I understand that. That is a very valid point. Now I'd like to ask, if you had 122 pieces of rail when this was turned over 2 years ago?
2 years ago, ma'am.
2 years ago, you mean you've had 122 pieces of rail that you already replaced? PH Rams, Global, APT, I mean, why is it not in your inventory and why are you borrowing from LRT?
Yeah.
Ma'am, good morning, Madam Chair. My name is Roel Bakar. I'm representing CBNT Philippines and not longer PH Rams and CBNT joint venture since PH Rams has been dissolved for whatever reason. If I may add, ma'am, in the reports, there were 3 reports made. One was made by Sistra in 2010. I have a copy. I may submit to the chair. And then another was made by us as a standard procedure for maintenance. We did a thorough, I think much thorough report compared to the MTR since we were opening up the rolling stock, the escalator, so we know. We had the OEM, the original equipment manufacturers, look into even the air conditioning system, even the lubrication, and found out that this, the assessment that was found by the OEMs, including the rails, had problems even before. Hindi po pwedeng masira po ng isang Filipino contractor within the span of 6 months ang isang sturdy rail system. Kahit po ipalo po natin sa malaking yung riles o yung tren, ipalo po natin yan sa kahit saan within a year's time. Hindi po magkakaroon ng ganong sira po yun. The faults na nangyari po yan, even when we had the track, pinutol po namin yung track and had it checked by a laboratory in Germany. I have my consultant right here with me to explain kung ano po yung condition when we took over as standard protocol po nung na take over na. Just to mention also that we were the interim temporary maintenance provider kami for 6 months. We were just extended because we intend to bid for the next planned bidding and place our own the right ideal price for the maintenance and even considering rehabilitation. What the system that we took over was really obsolete kasi wala pong rehabilitation eh. One point that I would want to raise is the infamous car number 70. It was inspected by even the MRTC chair. Na-cannibalize po siya. But right now, I have this report in 2008 and 2009. Nandito po, I will submit to the chair. Na yung pong car number 70 was rehabilitated. Kasama po dun sa 2008-2009 rehabilitation program nung pong MRTC and Sumitomo Corporation. But when we found out the assessment coming from the original equipment manufacturers, motors were running at 1.6 million. Ngayon po, sobra na. Your air conditioning system they're not actually using the original parts. We found that out. The assessment was submitted to DOTC sometime February 2013. Nagtataka ko, why would they even blame the Filipino contractors when in fact, yung pong natanggap, bulok na po yung sistema. Wala na pong hindi na po pwedeng ideally i-maintain. It's beyond maintenance. It's going to be rehabilitated and replaced dun po. Even the escalators and elevators, we have found that some of the major parts were in the backyard escalator manufacturer po, even in Mandaluyong City. Meron pong gumagawa, it's subcontracted by the TESP, yung previous maintenance provider. I would know because I've worked with Sumitomo Corporation, and my experience came from Sumitomo Corporation for the past 19 years, from MRT-3 to Line 2 depot until the capacity expansion of Line 1. So I've made my own company and had contracted with Sumitomo Corporation and as an affiliate with Mitsubishi Heavy Industries.
You know what, sir? I truly appreciate that, knowing that you've actually done your own audit report.
Yes, ma'am.
You've commissioned your own report. You have your own analysis, because really, truly, reports are there to be checked against another report. Now, in your particular case, though, you were mentioning that it was given to you in that deplorable or in that state. The fact remains that the MRT system, of course, is getting old. So by the time you have it, it will not be in the same situation as when it was brand new. On the other hand, the problem now that you might have been facing is that when Sumitomo was running it, there was hardly any problems. So even if this is at least because now we're getting more media attention, if you care to disprove that, please do so and tell me what other occurrences there might have been
Yes,
during
ma'am.
the past.
I disagree with that, ma'am. There had been problems in the past. Even ANC, the compilation of media, would say there are a lot of faults that had made by during the term of Sumitomo. There are even others that are not reported due to safety concerns. Like there were one instance, an explosion took place that derailed a train while it's being repaired in under the depot, where there are many fire volunteers that went there, but it's due to a safety concern. It was not reported, but since we are in a rail industry, we all know of that incident.
Okay, again, the finger pointing at this point is not very productive. So I will go back to the single point of responsibility issue. Yusek Limcauco or Yusek Lotilla, is this something you are now considering? Somebody who will actually maintain and rehabilitate, just one company that will be responsible so that it's easy for us to find who will be liable in case something goes wrong?
Madam Chair, in a system, of course, the ideal situation, Madam Chair, is always to have a what one would call a general contractor, and that person or that company will be the one that has overall responsibility for all of the works. Because one problem with systems is, of course, you need to integrate the various parts of the system. You have to make sure that all of these parts really work together and work together well. The thing, though, Madam Chair, is that if one were to go into that type of approach, then one has to be ready with the requisite financing, Madam Chair, because normally when you have a general contractor for the entire system, then that general contractor will subcontract to the specific original equipment manufacturer or the specific specialist in the area who will do the particular work which will allow all of these systems to communicate and to work together. Now, kaya nga po ma'am, what happened was when the DOTC was encountered all of these problems, the approach that was taken was to look at the problems that were most urgent. That is why po, I think one of the most urgent problems, ma'am, is the rails. And that's the reason why po na kaagad we sought funding for the rail replacement. And that's the reason why po there's a program for replacing 6 linear kilometers of rail in this particular system.
This is part of the budget that was approved for next year.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
And when are you ordering it, Mr. San Jose?
Actually po ma'am, yung bidding nasa post-qualification process na po ngayon. And we do hope to be able to award this before the close of this year.
So sir, mga ilan po yung nag-bid?
3 po yung nag-signify ng kanilang interest.
Meron naman po mga track record dito.
Meron
As in,
po.
aside from tracks, meron silang track record.
Sa ngayon po, yung lowest calculated bid, pwede ko na po ba sabihin kasi hindi pa tapos yung...
Basta lang kumpiyansa tayo na hindi natin, meron naman po silang, hindi naman po sila undercapitalized. O, I mean, I don't know if I can get advanced information on the bidders. Of course, I can't. But then, in what you have, the information that you have, are the bidders reputable providers? Have you worked with them before? Do they have a reputation in the industry, or is this the first time you've come across those names?
Hindi ko lang po masabi yung pangalan, pero mamaya po kung gusto nyo, ay maaari po namin sabihin sa inyo.
Basta po legal. Hindi ko alam kung pwede ba malaman ko na yung pangalan.
Si Yusek Lutilla po siguro makakapagsagot.
O sige, pag-usapan na, ganito na lang po. Pinapaalala ko lang po sa inyo dahil hindi naman po ako pwede makialam sa mga bagay na hindi ko dapat panghimasukan. Pero subalit, pag yan po ay nabid ninyo at magkakaroon muli ng question sa kinatatayuan ng kumpanya, halimbawa, undercapitalized o wala man lang track record sa paggawa ng ganitong uri ng trabaho, mahihirapan na naman po tayo at madedelay tayo. So, hindi lamang po sa halaga ng pera siguro, tignan din natin na meron talaga silang escrow o may pera talaga sila na ilalabas para dito. Sapagkat yung track na yan, yung sistra pa pala, may problema na tayo dyan. Ngayon lang tayo umabot sa puntong ito na bibili tayo. Sa tingin ko naman, kung alam naman nila ligtasan ng ating mga kababayan na nakasalalay, yung mga kasamahan ko dito sa Senado hindi mag-aatubili na ibigay ang pera na yan noon pa man. So, meron talaga tayong kahinaan sa pagkilos sa tingin ko. So, ituloy na po natin. Salamat po, Mr. Roel, sa inyong presentasyon dahil maganda naman po na meron din gumagawa ng ibang audit pick offer dito na may sinabi din si Secretary Lutilla. Gusto ko makita yan dahil ang pakay nga nito ay solusyon at hindi lamang magbigay ng mambintang sa iba. So, mag-ano na po tayo ng presentation.
Madam Chair, can I proceed with the brief? Yes. I tried to make this brief since the Chair has already given us a preliminary summary earlier, but I'd just like to go through this briefly and maybe just do a highlights on the executive summary on the MTR Hong Kong. First of all, do we have the... Oh, it's over here. Okay. The MTR Hong Kong was commissioned by MRTC to conduct an assessment survey on the current condition of the MRT-3. The assessments that were carried out were on the following systems: track at the depot and mainline, rolling stock, signaling system, high voltage power supply system and overhead catenary system, communication system, stations and its facilities, and depot facilities. These are the 7 aspects of the MTR report. I would just like to make a highlight that there was a limitation to this report, that the MTR... By the way, when I give this report, I am quoting verbatim from the MTR report. There's nothing added to it, word for word. No. Number one, that the accuracy of the report, including assessment and recommendations, are compromised by incomplete information provided to MTR Corporation by DOTC and the current maintenance provider, APT Global. Number two, the review of the spares and consumption and stock level is specifically asked to be excluded from the scope. So there was a specific exclusion on spare parts from the report. Third, maintenance review was also specifically asked to be excluded from the scope of the review. Fourth, observations in the report are made through visual inspection, interview with personnel, preliminary, and limited information received after the review. So this is only based on whatever information they actually got, limited as it may be. Since maintenance and spare parts were omitted from the review, which originally was the intention, then therefore a lot of the information they were asking for relating to maintenance and spare parts were not given to them.
May I ask, sir, how were they rejected from auditing the parts? Did they approach anyone in particular? No. Were they given a written denial?
Yes. Madam Chair, this was revealed to us, and I actually knew about it, but it was also stated by the chairman of MRTC, Tomas De Leon, in the congressional hearing last Monday, that it was DOTC who asked him to basically omit the maintenance and spare parts report.
Did he mention a particular name from the DOTC?
What's their name? You were there. DOTC operations. I can ask him for the name, Madam.
Because
Chair.
sir, if that was the case, didn't you insist that, why? And
yes, we actually did, and we insisted. Actually, our nominees in the board, Mr. Tagle and Attorney Mondok, actually insisted on that in the board, except that the operations, DOTC operations, was saying that we should omit the maintenance and spare parts. However, our nominees talked to the MTR representative and asked if maintenance could still be included. And the answer of the MTR then to them was, even if they ask for an omission, we will still touch on it, the maintenance and spare parts. That was the exact answer to them by the MTR. Now, Madam Chair, you have to understand, my nominees are merely 4 out of 14. We don't really have the numbers to carry any resolutions in that board.
Are you aware of this, Mr. Lotilla?
Madam
The
Chair,
omission of the spare parts inventory?
Madam Chair, actually, I only learned about this when the report was shown to Congress, Madam Chair. We will look into it, Madam Chair.
Okay, go ahead, because this is go ahead with your
Yes,
assessments, sir.
So now based on that, this is the limited findings that they could see visually. Number one, on tracks, as you mentioned earlier, it is found to be poor and unacceptable in its condition to allow continuous safe operation of the railway up to its designated standard. We show pictures of the rail here to show they're beginning to look like the comfort rooms, as bad as. But you can see how bad the rails are. And just to move quickly through this, a 4-fold increase in broken rails was noted over the last 3 years. Again, coincidentally, it's when the maintenance provider was changed. As you can see, in between 11 and 12, it was 4 cases. In years 12 to 13, 11, and now 13 to 14, it's 22. That is between 20. And of course, you can see this trend. If it continues, by next year, it's going to be much worse. It's doubling every year. On the tracks, all of the systems surveyed, the track condition is most alarming and requires immediate attention. Replacement of defective section is recommended, but it is noticed that there is insufficient stock. This is very clear alarm that the current maintenance strategy is insufficient to halt the growth of the defect. The cases of broken rail are expected to continue to increase, exacerbating the safety risk. The fact that broken rail cases in the past had not led to train derailment should not be taken as an indication that it will not happen in the future. If rail break do occur, despite the speed restriction to 40 kilometers per hour, and is unnoticed, derailment risk would still be considerable. A broken rail, and this is the most serious statement here, a broken rail is a serious threat to the safe operation of a railway. It can potentially cause train derailment, resulting in substantial casualties in a high-usage system as the MRT-3.
Let me ask you, sir, with this assessment, do you think that it is still reasonable for the DOTC to wait until the third quarter to replace this?
Ma'am, it should be replaced immediately. It should be replaced immediately. That's even too long to wait. This broken rail system has to be addressed immediately. There has to be a search worldwide from all manufacturers for any pieces that are available, and it has to be purchased and brought in immediately for spares. And it's possible. It can be done.
Do you agree with this assessment, Mr. San Jose?
Ang assessment po natin dito sa tracks, ito po ay totoo po yung sinasabi ni Secretilla na noong 2010 ay nagkaroon po ng SISTRA assessment para po doon sa mid-year life assessment ng sistema. At yung pong mga nakalagay sa pictures na yan ay present na rin po yan noong 2010. Ibig sabihin po, when we conducted that audit, sabi po ng SISTRA, parehas din po silang sinasabi ngayon ng MTR na meron pong tinatawag na rail contact fatigue. Ibig sabihin po nun, ang advanced stage po kasi nung rail contact fatigue ay magkakaroon na ng frequency ng pagkaroon ng cracks and breakage sa rail. So, ngayon na po yung nagmamanifest yan. Noong pong 2010, nung amin pong ginawa yung inventaryo ng kung saan po prevalent yung shelling and stamping, ito po ay umaabot sa 3.882 kilometers. Noong 2013 po yung October, umabot na po ito sa 6,000 lineal meters. So, kaya po ngayon, bumibili yung DOTC ng 7,256 linear meters para po ma-address itong pagpalit ng mga trucks na meron pong severe stamping and shelling.
Pero sabi po nito, itong binibili po ninyo ay hindi pa natin nabibili. Di ba? May bidding pa po. Tama ba? Pagkakaintindi ko, o meron na kayong preliminary na bibilin?
Yung pong totoo po yung sinasabi nyo, ma'am, na nasa bidding process po ito. And yung delivery period po ay 3 buwan bago po makarating dito yung release.
So, we're talking about a bidding process which will take about a month? Ganun ba yon?
We are, kung masusunod po yung schedule na ginagawa po ngayong bidding, may award po ito before the end of the year. And first week po ng 2015 ay mai-issue po yung notice to procedure.
Kasi po ganito lang, syempre kayo po yung OIC ng MRT. Gusto ko namang pagaanin din ang bigat sa iyong balikat kung sakaling may nangyari. Kaya ito na po yung pagkakataon ninyo na sabihin kung sa tingin nyo ba ay pwede talaga tayo maghintay ng normal na proseso para dito o kailangan na natin umpisahan ngayon mismo dahil sa tingin ko naman kung may contingency fund ang gobyerno pagdating sa kaligtasan ng ating mga kababayan na hindi naman nila ipagkakait pero kailangan natin ang inyong assessment kung kayong OIC. Ano ba sa tingin nyo? Mag-intay ba tayo? O...
Kung ako po man tatanungin nyo, kailangan po natin yung pagpalit ng mga riles magmula pa po nung 2010. Kasi nung 2010 pa po ay mayroon ng 3.8 kilometers na kinakailangan palitan. Sa ngayon po kasi, ang facility na naibigay po sa amin to do the replacement, ito pong fund ngayon ay for 7,000 linear meters na kaya lang po ay dumadaan po ito sa procurement process ng DOTC. So, meron pong government rules and regulations na nakatakda po para gawin po sa pagbili nito. Pero kung kami po ang masusunod, yung kinakailangan po, dapat po kaagad-agad o matagal na po nating sinimulan ang systematic replacement ng sa ngayon po ay mahigit na sa 6 linear kilometers ng mga relays po natin. Kasi ito po yung dahilan kung bakit nagkakaroon po tayo ng maraming inconveniences na pinakita po kanina sa slides ni Mr. Sobrepeña na lumalaki po yung bilang ng broken rails. Ito pong broken rails natin na to, nadidetect po ito ng ating signaling system kasi pong track circuit natin na sa signaling, kapag meron pong breakage sa circuitry, mag-a-appear po kaagad dyan. Kaya nga po ang nangyayari, every time pong nadidetect natin na may broken rails, tinitigil po natin yung operasyon ng tren. Yung po ay nagdudulot ng malaking inconvenience sa ating mga pasahero. Kaya lang po ma'am, dahil po naman sa safety po talagang pinag-uusapan dito, kaya hindi rin po kami pumapayag na pag may na-detect po na broken rail ay napadaanin yung train. Kinakailangan po muna natin na ito po ay kumpunihin at palitan bago po natin muli siyang mapadaanan. Kaya po dyan ay talaga pong humingi kami ng paumanhin kasi yan na po talaga ang kondisyon ngayon at amin po talagang pinagsisimukapan na mapalitan po ito.
Tama po kayo. Ang masasabi ko lamang po, parang nababasa ko sa inyong kilos at pananalita, talagang dapat palitan na. 2010 pa to dapat palitan. Kaya lang nakatali ang ating kamay sapagkat may proseso tayo sa gobyerno. Pero ito nga po yung siguro marahil pwede tayong mag-usap pagkatapos ito sapagkat kung merong paraan para mas mapabilis ang bidding process na hindi naman tayo maiisahan ng hindi kompetensya na bidder, dapat magawa na natin kasi akalain nyo sa konsensya ninyo nakasalalay lahat ito. Nakikita ko naman mukhang mabuting tao kayo, kaya lang nga po minsan yung ating sistema sa gobyerno ang mismong nagpapabagal sa atin. So yun po, malinaw ha. Malinaw dito, 2010 pa dapat pinalitan. Hindi nagawa. So ngayon, sinabi na ng MTR, it doesn't matter that it didn't break down in the past, that it didn't cause accident, that we should be complacent and not act on it immediately. So I think, in my personal opinion, I'm not, again, most of us here aren't engineers, but I think that third quarter of next year might be a little too long, a little too late. It might be a little too late. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Ms. LV Medina, the Center for Commuter Protection, for being here as a witness to our discussion also. Mr. Sobrepeña, do you still have more in your presentation?
Very short, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead, please.
First of all, just on the issue, there is no doubt a 12-year-old or a 10-year-old system is old and has to undergo a lot of maintenance. That's not in refute. I don't refute anything like that. I don't refute there were problems in the past. The only thing that I'm stressing is in the past they had all the parts to replace it. Even a Mercedes-Benz, kahit anong kotse, pag brand new, okay. Pag 10-year-old, kailangan na ng pyesa yan. Hindi na kailangan pag-usapan kung tumatakbo ng perfect yan o hindi. But kailangan ng pyesa para tumakbo. The point I'm stressing is, the maintenance provider was supposed to give all these parts, including the rails. All the rails should have been part of that 1.4 million contract of the contractor today. Now, why government is paying and buying for parts that were supposed to be in a parts and service contract is an issue that I would like to...
Oo nga pala po. Pwede bang matanong, Yusek Lutilla, ba't naging ganun po? Or Yusek Limcao ko, bakit kasama yan sa maintenance, di ba yung parts? Yun ba yung pinasok ninyo o maintenance lang, service lang walang parts? Dito sa global. Global ba ngayon, no? Global? Opo.
Ma'am, pwede pong magano. Una-una po ma'am, salamat na mabuti doon sa sinasabi niyo na kung kinakailangan po at may magagawa tayo ng paraan para po papabilisin yung pagpalit po ng relays, malaki pong tulong po talaga yan sa operation ng MRT at para po maiangat po natin yung safety level uli ng ating biyahe. Tungkol naman po doon sa pagbili ng mga relays, sa ngayon po kasi meron pong final billing po yung Sumitomo Corporation sa MRT na hindi po namin ma-recommend na bayaran kasi po yung findings namin ng mga engineers ng MRT na yung po ngang kinakailangan palitan na 3.882 kilometers of rails during the time na ng 2010 ay hindi po na nagawa. Kaya po hanggang sa ngayon hindi rin po namin ma-recommend na bayaran in full yung final payment until after po na sana dapat mapalitan din po yun kasi kasama po sa kontrata yung labor and parts po.
Magkano po yun? Yung final payment dapat?
Ang final payment po na nasa amin ng Sumitomo na ngayon ay yung pong kanilang last month na 1.43 million US dollars plus po yung escalation fee na umaabot po ng 800,000 US dollars. So, yun po ang inihingi nila na ma-release na. Ang condition lang naman po namin kung maaari, palitan nila yung nakita na inventaryo ng mga riles na hindi po napalitan, kapalit po ng pagbayad din ng kanilang final billing.
Usap. Go ahead, Mr. Sobrepena.
Ma'am, I think that was not really the answer to your question, if I may just add, because the question is, it's supposed to be a parts and service contract by ATP Global. We're not talking about Sumitomo. And why is DOTC buying the parts when, in fact, it should have been supplied by ATP Global? I think that was the question. But just to answer the question of the $15 million, the largest part of it, I believe about $10 to $12 million of that bill was for VAT, because under the BLT agreement, this is supposed to be a tax-free and VAT-free transaction. So a big amount of the $15 million, ma'am, Your Honor, is supposed to be the payment of DOTC for the VAT, which the BIR was billing Sumitomo. 12 million out of the 15 million. The 3 million had to do with escalation amounts that were not paid by DOTC to Sumitomo. But that's not really the point. The point is, I think, why is DOTC paying when in fact it should be ATP supplied, no? But anyway, so
yes, go ahead.
So, ma'am, I was just explaining what the 15 million was. It's really 12 million of that, I was informed, was supposed to be VAT. We can ask Sumitomo to come here and explain that themselves, but as I was informed, the contract is supposed to be tax-free. The BIR is billing them 12 million in VAT. The OTC is supposed to pay for that. That will just go to the BIR, 12 million of the 15 million. And the 3 million is for escalation that was not paid to them in the last 12 years. So, but like I said, I know we're talking about now and moving forward in the future. The parts and service contract, I think, of ATP Global, the parts did not happen, which is why that's why DOTC is now buying the parts for them. But it was actually supposed to be in the parts and service contract of ATP Global.
Yes, just for the record, let me get this straight. Your original contract with Global, is it parts and services or just services?
Madam Chair, it was parts and services po, Madam Chair.
So obviously, let's say that there was neglect on the part of Sumitomo to change certain rails, but I'm sure that there was also a part where Global should have provided the replacement. So meaning, if the DOTC is now bearing the brunt of having to do the ordering, you're almost admitting that Global is not performing according to what you have agreed upon. Am I correct?
Madam Chair, the system po kasi for payment is dependent on a certain number of trains being made available to the system. It is only when they fail to deliver the required number po, that's when the penalties kick in. And that's where po the importance of supplying the parts becomes a crucial factor. Because kung hindi po nila binili yun, and therefore, consequently, hindi po nila ma-deliver po yung required number of trains po, then the penalty system comes in po and nababawasan po yung bayad sa contractor.
Alam niyo po talaga, parang dami-dami na talagang dumi at gulo dito na gusto na nating sabihin, iwanan na natin itong mga kasunduan na ito na nagkamali tayo, matatapos na at mag-umpisa tayo uli. Pero syempre, kailangan din natin malaman kung sinong mananagot. Ngayon, yung sinasabi niyo, bale, kung naintindihan ko ng tama, ibibigay lang nila yung kapalit kung may nasira talaga. Pero dahil wala naman nasisira, kung hindi nasisira, hindi nila papalitan kahit na masisira na. Ganun po ba?
Madam Chair, ang kontrata po kasi, actually, ang sinasabi po dyan na kung ano ho dinatnan nila na inventaryo po ng parts, yun po, dapat nila iwanan pag umalis po sila, pag nag-terminate po yung kontrata nila.
So, ibig sabihin, kung yung nadatnan nila ay substandard at masisira na, ganun din nila iiwanan, ganun.
Hindi po, Madam Chair. I meant po the inventory po of parts po.
Okay, inventory of parts. So, if you are correct with the 122 rails, so do you have that many now in stock before their term ends?
Excuse me, Madam Chair, let me answer that question. Since Mr. Sobrapena did not get, I mean, he says it right here in his presentation, did not get the inventory stocks of the maintenance currently on their review, so he does not know how many rails spares or what quantity we have. By the way, in any broken rails or any replacement rails that MRT-3 has occurred in serviceable time, we repaired a certain amount, a minimum of rails. We don't replace 1 kilometer out of it, or we don't replace 1 meter, or 100 rails. We only replace it for an operational, to the next operating time is minimum of 4.5 meters. So the repair cycle of maintenance is to repair the actual fault or any system, just to make it serviceable on the next hour, the next minute, to get our riding public for
So exactly my point. If
transportation.
there's no problem, you will not fix it because your job is not to rehabilitate.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a point made. Now, 122 pieces of rail was submitted by Somitoma. Is this true, sir?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We only received 68 pieces of rails during our time.
Therefore, 68 pieces will have to be returned.
Yes, we were only able to use during our term for the interim period about half of it, not even half.
So there should be about 34 left when
Yes.
you came in, Mr. Global? Am I correct?
I don't know how many is practically, but our obligation to replenish or to utilize is 25 pieces in our terms of reference.
Nako, may pabawas ng pabawas. Hindi bale na, okay? Because we are getting into particulars that will not really help us at this point in time with the problems that we are facing, the gravity of the problem, which is the safety issue. I don't want to scare our passengers, but of course, they have to know that we are doing what we can to expedite the rehabilitation, etc. Now, I will leave this MTR report now, and I will go now on, just for the record, who is in charge now of the maintenance? Still Global, am I correct, Attorney Lotilia?
Opo, Madam Chair, it's still APT Global.
And then for the record, when will your bidding, since you had the failed bidding in October or November, when is your bidding again for the maintenance going to start?
Madam Chair, the process is ongoing po. We conducted one-on-one meetings na po with the interested bidders, and we have already published po the terms of reference.
So in short, wala pa pong mga bidders.
Hindi po. There were already interested bidders po, Madam Chair.
Pero
but
wala pang nagbibid.
Wala pa po kasi kapapublish pa lang po, ma'am, ng terms of
Kailan
reference.
po kayo nag-publish ng terms?
Sunday po, Madam Chair.
Okay. Kailan po magsasara yung... Kailan po matatapos ang proseso? Ganun na lang po, para mas madali.
Madam Chair, yung submission and opening of bids po is scheduled for January 20, Madam Chair.
January 20.
Opo,
Ang
Madam Chair.
Sumitomo po ba, Mr. Sobrepeña, ay sasali dito?
Ma'am, they will not. And the reason is, again, they require that the rehab be undertaken, completely restored back to zero before they take over maintenance and give guarantees.
Pero may sinasabi po kayo na for 2 point something million a month, Kasama na po yung rehabilitation
Yes.
dyan. So kung papayag
Yes.
ang DOTC sa halaga na yon, yun ba ay
Madam Chair, maybe the best thing is I can brief you on exactly what the proposal is at this point.
Proposal by-
the fast track proposal of holdings together with Sumitomo.
is it
Yes. It's very short, one page.
go ahead, please.
Yeah. If we can have that. By the way, ma'am, while they're putting it, I just want to put it on record that PH Trams signed off that they received the 122 rails. They have signed off this, all of these parts, not just rails, but thousands of parts. PH Trams signed off, DOTC signed off on the turnover of all these parts. Just make it on record.
Thank you for clarifying that. Again, consistency, gentlemen, is really important with your statements.
Yes. Sumitomo. Saan na ba? Okay.
While you're presenting that, did you receive the 42 million amount that was given to procure an audit report, MRT? 42,000, sorry. 42,000.
$41,000 a
40
month po yan, Madam Chair. It's in the BLT contract po kasi.
So do they receive it?
MRTC gets it monthly po.
Okay. So then it's just fitting that you have that
Yes, ma'am. The
audit report.
41,000 is to pay for staffing and admin of MRTC. Okay, so it goes to employees. When we were the ones in handling MRTC, we had about 20 employees who were using. That's not for an audit. That's for payment of our employees who were actually working together with the OTC in managing the maintenance. No, but now it's taken over by the GFI.
No,
so-
but then is there a stipulation there that audit should be part of it?
no,
No? So
It was-
did we just assume that it will be part of it?
it's part of the maintenance.
Well, ma'am, it's because the $41,000 is still being paid po. And yet, I think there are only a few employees na lang po of MRTC. And that's the reason po na when we were discussing it with MRTC po, ma'am, na since we were paying that $41,000, then it might as well be something that they should consider as part of administration.
So you actually told them this.
The
Did you write them?
The MRTC chairman, Madam Chair.
So you were told.
Ma'am, that's Tomas De Leon. They should ask Land Bank DBP what they're doing with the 41,000 because we're no longer there.
So in short, you paid for this on your own,
This was paid by MRTC on its own. Yes.
on its own, not
Yes.
from the proceeds being received by
No.
DBP or Land
Yeah,
Bank.
yeah.
Why is he not here?
Ma'am,
Okay, go ahead, please.
if I may continue. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. After we received the MTR report, the preliminary reports, we got very concerned as owners, and we have put together what we call a fast-track rehabilitation and maintenance proposal. First of all, the cost would be $98 million, or $4.5 billion, and funding will be invested by the private sector for the entire amount of the rehab of the existing MRT-3 system Phase 1, including the general overhaul of all 73 trains, or LRVs. This would be substantially completed in 18 months. The rehabilitation and the 2-year special maintenance will have a budget of $150 million. That would include $2.2 million a month over a period of 24 months. That would mean maintain and would also include another overhaul within the next 10 years. So we're now talking of 2 overhauls. The current overhaul, which needs to be done today, and another overhaul which will have to be done in another 8 years. So since this is a 10-year contract, then it also includes a second overhaul, which in fact will be the third overhaul. Third, retirement and restructuring of the MRT bonds, which will take out the subsidy being paid by the OTC. This means that private sector will raise the money and buy the bonds from DBP Land Bank. Fourth, the operation and maintenance will go to the private sector under a management agreement with the OTC. Fifth, maintenance of the existing MRT-3 Phase 1 for 2.2 million fixed at monthly cost for 10 years, no escalation, including labor, all spare parts, and third general overhaul of 2024. This will be paid by the way, by the private sector from its revenue share. Government will not pay this maintenance budget anymore. The revenue sharing with DOTC will be based on provisions in the BLT agreement. Fares as a policy will be no higher than the bus fare, the existing bus fares. So that's the one-page presentation, and the scope of rehab work will be extensively everything that has to be done. Power supply, overhead catenary, radio, CCTV that were found unsatisfactory, PABX, signaling, replacement and rehab of all tracks, rehab of the Unimog emergency vehicle, rehab of the station facilities, including toilets, bathrooms, elevators, escalators, complete rehab. Rehab of the depot equipment, which is now, a lot of them are not being used because they're not working. Rehab and general overhaul of all 73 LRVs, back to zero, back to new. Rehab of the automatic fare collection system. Okay. So, in short, ma'am, our proposal is private sector comes in. Sumitomo has already signified their interest to pursue this together with us. We will raise the money. We will immediately go into rehab. We will immediately change all the rails necessary. We propose that we take over operations and maintenance, and that revenues will pay for all of these rehab costs and overhauling and all of that at no cost to government.
You know, this sounds very promising.
Yes, ma'am.
On the other hand, we are also taught that anything that sounds too good to be true is probably not good, right? So, I mean, so I would like to know, what is in it for you? Are there strings attached here? And why is DOTC not exactly excited about this? If this is your proposal, who will own this? Who are the private sector investors? Is this MPIC?
No, ma'am. This is being done by MRT Holdings. It's a fast-track solution. As a matter of fact...
So are you going to raise funds for this, is what you're saying?
Yes, ma'am. And if MPIC wants to join us in this endeavor, they can join us. We have a group who's willing to fund it together with Sumitomo. Of course, I'm not saying that private sector will do this at no profit. It has to have a certain degree of profit, but it has limitations. Not higher than the bus fare. Revenue collection will pay for all of this. So there are conditions which we want to discuss with the OTC.
Okay.
No?
Remember that the contract, the BLT contract, will end in 2025.
Yes.
So having done this, will you have to extend? Will the government have to enter into a longer-term agreement with you?
Ma'am, the way we envision this, the concession agreement which ends in 2025 will end in 2025. There is no extension on the concession agreement. What we merely ask for is an extension of the management contract for 5 years. Just a management contract. So the government owns it already in 2025 as envisioned in the BLT agreement. And what we want is a 5-year management contract to continue the revenue share in order to pay for all the expenses.
So it will be until 2030 with a management contract,
Yes,
just the
ma'am.
management,
Just the management
contract aspect.
Yes.
What I'm also weary is I'm not sure if there's a government guarantee on the loan. If you will secure certain investments for this, if you default on that, the government might have to take over again. And this is also one reason why you will be part of it, I assume, right? And I don't know if your working conditions with them have been smooth sailing. It seems like it's not. I don't know if it's fair to you to want to get into, more commitment with the government, considering the history of your communications with them.
Yes, ma'am. All I want to say is, as owners and as the company that built this, We're extremely, extremely concerned about safety and convenience to the public. This is what is motivating us to move now. Secondly, as owners, there are owners' liabilities. And if there is any major accident, even if we are not maintaining it, even if we are not managing it, there is still liabilities.
Have you given this proposal to DOTC or not yet?
I have written DOTC a letter stating that this proposal is on the table. I have asked for a meeting yesterday, specifically before the Senate hearing. They have not replied.
Well, it's only been yesterday,
But I gave the proposal, but what date? November 24.
Yusek Lutilla, are you aware of such a proposal?
Madam Chair, the proposal was outlined in a letter sent to DOTC, Madam Chair, and we replied by saying that, of course, we would be interested to know the details of the proposal, and that's the reason po, Madam Chair, that Mr. Sobrepeña was asking about a date for the presentation po.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I would like now to go to, I have a short presentation on the ownership of the MRT. So, Mr. Sobrepeña, while you're here, at least you can say, you can give your side if this is true or not. Because part of it also is, we just want to make sure that the government is not, let's say, reneging on its commitment, or that the government is not also being victimized here when it comes to certain transactions that the original owners of the MRT might have gotten itself into. So, going to the slide on private investors' initial investment. So in 1991, investors provided, we have to go back to this history, $190 million. Am I correct, Mr. Sobrepeña? That's the initial investment.
Yes, ma'am. This was in, my group just got involved in 1995. The original investors were the group of Eli Levin, who won the bid under Corazon President Aquino in 1991. We got involved in 1995, 96.
Okay, so that's $190 million that they put in, but the government actually added $489 million more for the completion of this project. Am I correct?
No, ma'am. The project finance was also raised by our company, MRTC, and as collateral, we actually gave all our shares. The whole company was the collateral, including our $190 million.
Collateral to the different investors.
For the $489 million loan.
But you have a government guarantee, right?
Not directly, ma'am. Just to explain, if I may.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. What we have is, first of all, a DOTC guarantee that it will pay for the equity rental payments. Now, the equity rental payments are found in a schedule attached to the BLT agreement. The equity rental payments are over a 25-year period. DOTC guarantees to pay that. Now, in the event DOTC fails to guarantee that or to pay that to private sector, we actually have the right to call on a standby letter of credit with Philippine National Bank, with PNB. And that is supposed to make us whole. Now, in the event PNB LC, for any reason, is not sufficient to pay the debt, that is the only time that government will come in and fill in whatever is necessary to.
So that's exactly still the government filling in.
At the very end.
And there's been many times, I think, that there was some issues. I mean, it's very difficult to get into.
Details.
Just for the record, mentioning Elliott, Goldman, whatever, that the government had to step in, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Now, maybe noteworthy to mention, in the 25-year equity rental payments to repay this amount, the structure is so that the first 10 years, all payments go to the international lenders, that $489 million loan. Hardly any went to the private sector.
Okay. Now, that's exactly why I'm doing this presentation, because I don't want you to be the victim or to sound like the victim. Yeah. So you just correct me if I'm wrong. So next slide, please.
Yeah. So
you invested 28.6% of 190 million, and that equals for $54.34 million. Am I correct?
Uh,
Of the
sorry.
190, you invested about 28% or 29%.
Oh, you mean just our group?
Yes, just your group,
yes,
sir.
Approximately.
Okay. Next slide, please. So your investment of 54.3 million.
No.
So it is an estimated that your Mr. Sobrepena has received a minimum of 132 million. Let me explain why. So your investment is 54.3 million, your group. Your share of ERPs, equity rental payments received in 01 to 02 is 7.63 million. And then your share in securitization proceeds, 108.36 million. Sale to MPIC of his option, 25, 16.28 million, 700 million pesos, am I correct? So that's 132 million pesos that your group or you have actually earned from this. So that means you made money 2.43 times or 200%.
No, ma'am, that's not correct. What happened? You're basically looking at face values, no? But what happened is when we securitized all these receivables, since it's 25 years and back-ended from year 2011 to 2015, we securitized it into a bond, and that's the reason we did it. And we used the bond to basically settle debt, our own debt, you know. And when we settled our debt, we were only paid 10 to 15% of face value of that. So if you compute it on face value, you will arrive at that. But when you get a bond that matures in 25 years and earning only 15%, banks will discount that to a net present value. And that net present value that we use to retire our debt with the banks were only 10 to 15% of that.
I understand, sir, but for example, I'm an individual and I earn money, and let's say I received 1,000 pesos. That 1,000 pesos, I can only keep 500 because 500 is used to pay my debts. That's still for my benefit, am I not right? Because then it wipes out my debt. So that's still your income earned somehow
Yes, ma'am.
to
But
settle your obligations.
yes, but it's only the 10 to 15%. The balance is still with the bond, which was now purchased by DBP Land Bank. So the real value of that bond is now with the government institutions, the DBP Land Bank. As far as we're concerned, we sold the bond, and we basically got out to basically just retire our debt. And so with a lot of our consortium members.
This is a problem that we're getting into now. I know that you're a business and businesses are out to make money. I don't deny, we shouldn't deny anyone that right and that opportunity. On the other hand, it's gotten so unwieldy because of the division of certain ownership, selling stocks here and there, and then now you have the land bank and the DPP owning it, but then there is a portion of it owned by Bank of Commerce, UCPB, Export Bank. Am I correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And so these things should have originated from one group, but now it's transferred hands so many times that again it seems to contradict your single point of responsibility somehow. I mean, going back to that. I mean, sir, the reason why I'm raising this point is this. You want to see the system run better because of the liability issue. I get that, and I'm glad that you feel that way. On the other hand, sometimes you also cannot blame the government from mistrust. Because, for example, the ownership of this, there's a difference between the actual MRT and the operations and the advertising rights, etc. So your relationship has become contentious in a way because, you know, all of these things that we're trying to do, dividing, selling, having different owners in the board, is not really encouraging growth of a relationship for the maintenance of this. So if I can see the point of the DOTC as wanting to get rid of everyone else so that they can run it. But then the DOTC, I'm sorry to say, is not also doing such a good job. I mean, from the time that you took over, I mean, that's the truth. So, in short, all of us here are showing our shortcomings that we would just want to get to the bottom of this. I would be weary myself, sir, getting into business again with you, for example, if I know that ownership can again change hands so many times later on. I would want somebody who has a company and who will not sell it to different investment firms.
Madam Chair,
Sir.
we have never left the company. We still own it 100%.
I beg to disagree. How can you own it 100% when you've already sold certain rights to different? I mean, isn't it
No,
economic rights is already sold, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So you cannot own it 100%.
To explain, when I say we own it, the stocks and common share of the company, which is the corporation itself, is still under our name. All the original owners, Ayala, myself, everybody, we are prohibited from selling our common stocks until such time that the bonds, the MRT bonds, are fully paid off. So we have a warranty or a guarantee to the bondholders that we will not change ownership of the company until such time that the bonds are fully paid
Okay,
off.
now the bonds, DBP and Land Bank, they bought some of the bonds, right?
80%.
80%. So the remaining 20% is owned by UCPB,
BPI,
Bank Commerce, BPI, Export Bank. How much do you own?
at this point, 0, ma'am.
0.0.
No, we don't own any more bonds because we used it to retire debt many, many years ago.
But you just said that you're still the owners because
Yeah.
you have the bonds. Unless all the bonds are bought,
No,
right?
ma'am. The bonds are only the revenue stream. But the corporation who owns the asset, the trains, the rail, and the rights of the company still belong to us. The corporation shares belong to us. The revenue has gone to the bonds, which now has belonged to DBP.
So
Land
my
Bank.
question is, if the government, instead of buying ownership from the Land Bank or DBP, if the government secures ownership from other private banks, will the government now own it?
They will own the bonds, but not the company, ma'am.
See,
If
this is
they-
exactly my
ma'am,
point. See,
if-
they will own a certain portion, but it's really not tangible.
Yes, ma'am. If they want to buy the company, all they have to do is talk to us if they want to buy the company, and we can talk to them.
Okay, who does the valuation of the company?
It's something they can make an offer, we can agree.
So
and
your company exactly now is composed of what?
The company right now still owns the asset itself,
Meaning the structure itself.
which is valued at about $700 million, which is insured, should be insured at about $700 million.
So if they come up with $700 million, that's valued. Of course, you can always add like certain amounts, right? No. So $700 million plus, let's say the remaining bonds with the 5 or 4 other banks. That's the way the government can probably assume not just control but ownership. Am I correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you willing to talk to the government for this remaining
Ma'am,
700?
we're willing to talk to them anytime.
Did you hear that, Mr. Lotilla?
Madam Chair, yes,
Sir.
Madam Chair. But if I may, Madam Chair, with your indulgence, the theory espoused by the group of Mr. Sobrepena, Madam Chair, is that this entire system, which they built and leased and will transfer to government 25 years from the time of the start of operations in 2000, Madam Chair, is covered by this build-lease-transfer agreement. Now, when the equity rental payments were securitized, Madam Chair, and a portion was put into the bonds because one shareholder did not join the securitization. The rest did. Roughly 80 of them did. What they're saying is that if this entire system continues for 25 years and government continues to pay the equity rental payments, then under the BLT agreement, it should revert. The entire system should go to government at the end of the 25 years.
I know, in 25 years. But if you want to take out all the obstacles to operations, I'm just giving a scenario. How much will it cost? And he said 700 million not final, but on that ballpark, plus the remaining bonds.
Yes, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I only wish to point out, Madam Chair, that what they are saying is if the contract is followed for 25 years, then it goes to government. What's going to happen now if let's say, the so-called equity value buyout is done? What it does, Madam Chair, is to accelerate the payment of the 25-year equity rental payments. It's cut down from 25 years. It's now down to roughly, shall we say, 15 years. If it were done in 2015, what they're now saying, Madam Chair, is it cannot revert to government in that accelerated mode, because they're now saying that government has to pay them $700 million in order to acquire the system.
That's not how I understand it, sir. Because yes, it will revert to the government if you pay the 700, and in 2025 it will be a non-issue, because if you pay that amount now, I'm not saying that you do. I'm just saying this is what they're saying. Go
Sorry,
ahead,
ma'am.
sir.
I might have been misunderstood. I said the value of the asset of the company, together with the other rights, such as Makati Loop, Phase 2, Airport Link, it has rights, capacity expansion as well. The value of the asset is $700 million, because that's the value, the insured value of the asset today. Now, I'm not saying that's the value of our equity. It's much less than that, ma'am. And to even think to go to an equity value buyout, just to buy us out, to first spend $54 billion to pay land bank. Secondly, you have to have another so many billions to pay the 20% of bondholders before you get to buy us out. Why not just talk to us directly? Leave the bonds, just talk to us. Definitely, it's not going to be 54 billion. It's not going to be 40 billion. It's not going to even be 20 billion. It's going to be much, much less.
Exactly. So you're saying 54 billion DBP Land Bank and
That's
20 billion for the
the
remaining.
others, the remaining.
We're talking 20 billion pesos, right?
Yeah, and not even, that does not even include the equity stakeholders, myself, Ayala, and my other
Exactly.
partners.
So if, let's say, they leave those bonds and just talk to you directly.
Yes.
Exactly. This is
For a much,
this is,
much lesser amount, and it's finished.
Why did we not consider this? Because I think the point was raised by Senator Serge, Senator Ralph, that when we pay DVP Land Bank, I know it lessens their exposure. They have this requirement in the central bank not to be overexposed or to have loans of this amount for a long period, but it's really paying the government from one pocket to another. So now, maybe it's moot because we didn't approve that budget. Am I correct? We didn't approve that buyout with DBP Land Bank. So you were given a, let us leave this topic now, okay? At least it's clear here, before we proceed to the next, it's clear that the group of Mr. Sobrepeña is willing to discuss a buyout. Whether or not this will be beneficial to the government is up to you to assess and for us to be able to watch. Number two, it is clear that there are bonds owned by DBP Land Bank to the tune of 54 billion pesos, and the rest, you're shaking your head. I will ask you to add something to this. And the rest, the other banks that I mentioned, 20 billion pesos. Right. Okay. So if we talk about that, remember, Mr. Lutilla, Attorney Lutilla, you mentioned here that a requirement, you were saying that the EVBO, equity value buyout, is to clear the way in upgrading and rehabilitating MRT-3, not the solution to the MRT defects. That for me, obviously, if this was in business world, if you are to rehabilitate, if you have this upgrading and rehabilitating, then you will cure the MRT defects. So why is it not clearing the way? So the EVBO, you are still for it. Am I correct? You are still for it?
Madam Chair, with your indulgence, actually, Madam Chair, one of the first issues I think that has to be cleared up is this question of whether or not the equity holders have any rights at the end of the 25-year period, Madam Chair. Because, Madam Chair, if one were to follow the terms of the BLT, if ownership will go to government at the end of 25 years, then what it really just means is just follow the contract for 25 years and everything goes to government. Now, when you accelerate the process, because what has happened, Madam Chair, is they have parted with the economic rights, at least 80% of the shareholders, Madam Chair. When they parted with the economic rights, that's basically a parting away with the beneficial interest in the system.
We know that.
And when they did that, Madam Chair, does it mean to say then that when we collapse, let's say, the beneficial interest, because you accelerate the payment, instead of paying for 25 years, you pay after 15 years or 12 years. What they're saying now is that in addition to paying the equity rental payments, that government has to ante up with an additional amount to pay their equity in order to have the system. Madam Chair, with all respect, that is a concept that I think is totally out of bounds.
Okay. What they're presenting you are options. Sir, I can see your point. If we're going to own it in 25 years, why even buy it from them now? But if you see them as an obstacle, right? Isn't this what you're saying? I mean, if this is going to us, why are we even paying them now this amount?
Madam Chair, actually what I'm saying, Madam Chair, is if we have to pay the equity rental payments on an accelerated basis, meaning to say, retire the bonds today on the equity value buyout system, then it also wipes out their equity in the system. There is nothing to pay them anymore because precisely the entire contract was built on the theory that at the end of 25 years, the entire system will go to government without paying any additional cent, Madam Chair. I think that's just my point, Madam.
Okay, so this is where I see the issue will really lie. What you're saying is, after paying all of those bonds, virtually they owe nothing, right? What they're saying is, no, we only gave you the economic rights, but the physical structures are still with us. So that's where, Mr. Limcauco, would you like to add something? Yusek?
Ma'am, I just, in the BLT, it's very clear. Upon the EVBO, the entire asset goes to the government.
Ma'am,
Attorney Bondoc?
Madam Chairman, would like just to clarify. I think the scenario that Yusek Lutilla is talking about is if government follows the BLT. Wherein at the end of 25 years, both the asset and the corporation goes to government. But DOTC is the one contemplating a scenario of equity value buyout. That means government is violating the BLT. In that case, the equity value buyout merely states they get phase 1, the existing asset. But the corporation, the BLT continues to subsist, which means capacity expansion, phase 2, monumento are still the rights of MRTC. That's the difference. If you go on an equity value buyout, you cannot claim that you get everything, yet you violated it. So you have to pay for the equity value buyout, but the contract continues.
ma'am,
Go ahead, sir.
sir, ma'am, just to clarify and try to make it a layman's point of view. The equity value buyout provision in the BLT agreement was placed there to protect private sector investors. That's why it's called equity value buyout. The equity we are referring to is the equity in the project that we showed in the slide earlier, the $190 million over 25. So if government breaches, defaults, does not pay private sector, the equity that it put in the project will be protected by way of the equity value buyout. So in effect, what government will receive is the project and the equity of the company in the project, but not the company itself. The company is made whole on it, buy out all the corporate owners instead of going this roundabout way of going through the EVBO and all of that, they can keep all the 54 billion. It's not going to. We're not even saying it's going to cost 700 million. We're not even saying it's going to cost 300 million or 200 million.
$700 million,
It's
right?
Yes, it's the cost of the asset, but we're nowhere close to that when we're talking of that scenario of just going to the owners of buying it.
Okay. It's clear here, sir, maybe you should discuss. I mean,
Yes.
you have to figure out. I can understand why you may at this point detest each other. I mean, Mr. Sobrepeña, it's just so difficult to follow the ownership of the MRT. I mean, I see that whoever crafted this ownership and to spin off sales of different economic rights, etc., is a financial genius. I don't know, an evil genius, whatever. So I'm just saying, when I listen to you, you seem very competent. You know your business. I respect that. But I also would like to make sure that the government will not enter into another agreement where I feel it is, where I feel that the government is at a losing end. That is my responsibility. As much as I can contribute to the process. So the easiest to say start over, but it might be too expensive for us to just say that. And I see why Yusek Lutilla is maybe against it at this point. He doesn't feel that you deserve to get that much. But at least we're opening the point of conversation here, where you're coming from, where they're coming from, and hopefully we will be able to come up with a solution that will have our riding public as the beneficiaries. Now, let me ask you, Mr. Sobrepeña, about the MPIC purchase. Is it true that they actually negotiate? Am I correct?
Ma'am, the MPIC proposal is basically a cooperation agreement.
What amount did you receive from them and for what?
The MPIC proposal gave us an option so that we could work together with them to basically find a solution to the problem of the MRT situation or problem.
So they gave you money to help so that they will be part of finding a solution.
They gave an option or a partial down payment, so because they wanted to become stakeholders or equity stakeholders. However, at this point, Madam Chair, like I mentioned before, as the stockholders and owners of the MRTC company and MRT Holdings company, we cannot sell our equity or shares. We are not in a position to sell until all the bonds are paid.
Exactly. So they gave you money, and most of your economic rights and bonds are already with all the other banks. You said you have zero interest in that.
Yes, ma'am.
So what are you giving MPIC?
Madam Chair, the rights that we are pursuing together with Metro Pacific is the capacity, the rights that we have in the company.
So basically the arbitration case in Singapore.
No, Madam Chair. As a matter of fact, we want to drop that arbitration case.
What will it take you to drop it?
I have already informed MRTC, the nominees, to drop it time and again, Mr. Chairman De Leon, since 2010. Since 2010, I have been telling them to drop that case, Madam Chair.
So you're telling me Land Bank, DBP are still the ones pursuing it?
Yes, Madam.
Did you know that, Yusek Lutilla?
Madam Chair, I think there's a difference of opinion on the arbitration case, Madam Chair. Because, Madam Chair, the arbitration case was commenced precisely to compel government to exercise the equity value buyout, Madam Chair. Because at that point in time, government was remiss in its obligation to pay the equity rental payments. But that, ma'am, is a cause of action under the BLT contract. And it was triggered. And that's why, with no pun intended, ma'am, it's like a runaway train that when it's triggered, it continues on its course until it reaches the station.
Any comments?
Yes, Madam Chair. In any case, common sense, there is a complainant, there is and of course somebody who defends. In this case, the complainant is MRTC because government was not paying it the equity rental payments on time. As a matter of fact, at that time, I think they were between 8 to 12 months delayed. However, that has been cured. The breach has been cured because when the GFI nominees came in and DOF took over, they started curing all the breaches to private sector. If the very thing that caused the breach is already cured, then therefore there is no longer any cause to pursue any action in any court. And as private sector owners, we are saying it has been cured, let's drop it because it's going to be very costly for both parties to pursue it.
I will instruct the Secretariat to please write a letter to Mr. De Leon
Yes, ma'am.
and ask him to explain the reason why that arbitration is still ongoing when in fact he was supposedly informed by Mr. Sobrepeña that it should be dropped. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And now, thank you for clarifying that, sir. Before we end, of course you can still add a few more later on, but I would like to ask, who should I ask? Yusek Limcauco or Yusek Lotilla regarding the budget that was given to you by for 2015 and where it should go? Because what I have here is you were given, okay, the bicameral committee conference report on 2015 general. I am informed that the amount of 49.5 billion for equity value buyout of the Metro Rail was realigned to fund other items in the budget, including MRT taxes 6.5 billion. Please explain. MRT rehabilitation at 7.4 billion. Again, explain that. So, how much exactly are you given now? And what is it going to be for? Do you know how much was approved? Do you have a copy of that, Mr. Yusek Limcauco, Attorney Limcauco?
We know the 6 billion is for the taxes that the DOTC owes to the BIR.
For how many years, sir?
Several years already, ma'am. The exact number of years
Since
I'm
what administration?
since the previous administration, ma'am.
Okay, so basically we reached 6.5 billion in tax liabilities because it hasn't been paid every year. So this is also partly your responsibility since the time you took office, right? 4 years ago.
Yes.
Yes. So it's just going to be paid back to the government. Right, okay. Now, the 7.4 billion in rehabilitation, parang nagme-merry-go-round tayo ng bayad dito.
What we know is what we have for the supplemental budget. We have is 957 million, ma'am, in our supplemental budget.
957 million in your supplemental budget for
signaling overhaul. For the new signaling system, ma'am.
Okay. Sir, I'm not sure if you have a copy of the budget, but it's 7.4 billion in MRT rehabilitation. Do you have a breakdown already of that? Or is it too fresh off the print that press that you don't have it yet? Okay. Anyway, I think, let me inform you then that when I spoke to the chairman of the Finance Committee, he mentioned that there will be something specifically for the elevators and the escalators. Now, sir, since you're given a certain amount of 7.4 billion, perhaps you can consider the emergency items that we discussed, meaning the rails, and all these things that we need to be able to award. I don't know. I'm not sure if you have a contingency measure in place for situations like that, wherein if the bidding process takes too long, oh, actually you do. Didn't you apply? Didn't you just the failed bid? You just applied that to PH Trams, right? Without the bid before. So I mean, I'm not saying that you do the same now, but obviously you can do that. I don't know if there's a legal contention with what you've done for PH Trams, but I've seen you've done it before. maybe we can find a legal solution for us to be able to speed up awarding the rail contract because it's an emergency, I think.
Madam Chair, actually, ma'am, when it comes kasi to the broken rails po, actually, what happens is that the operations are stopped and the broken rail is immediately replaced po, ma'am. So, I mean, I just want to address that concern po na hindi na-address po yung broken rails. Yung broken rails po, ma'am, when that happens, that's addressed right away po. If there's a broken rail anywhere po, the operation is stopped po. That's a
Okay, sir, meron ba kayong stock na rail ngayon? Mga rails? Wala. Say pa
actually, ma'am, if we can explain in a sidebar, ma'am,
Okay,
we can
okay, sure.
explain the
In the interest of full disclosure, can you tell me why you want it in a sidebar? Without exactly saying first why what we're going to discuss.
well, no, ma'am, because the internal process has not yet been completed. That's why I thought it should just be explained privately, ma'am.
Okay, I will grant you that since I don't know yet, and I might later on have to disclose this also if I feel that it is not necessary for it to be an executive discussion. Anyway, so Mr. San Jose, wala na po tayong rails, no? So humihiram tayo sa LRT, ganun po ba?
Sa ngayon po, ma'am, meron pa tayong isang spare na natitira. Pag dalawa po na putol, manghihiram na po tayo sa LRT.
Okay. Kayo po, global, hindi ba sa inyo dapat yon?
Madam Chair, yes, pero yung consequently, yung contract ko namin, it's the month-to-month basis na ngayon. So it takes 3 or 4 months to order rails. So whatever we required rail brakes or may papalitan ho, naghiram mo kami sa LRT1 kasi pareho lang naman, a DOTC responsibility to actually give us that just to make the operational back to normal within an hour. So yun ho yung kalakaran ngayon. So but in a sense that kasi minimum ating order ng mga release ho, malalaki ang quantities. 500 to 1,000.
Thank
Madam
you,
Chair,
sir. Go ahead.
I think I don't want to point any fingers anymore. I would just like to suggest, as a private sector owner, that an emergency be called at this moment. Let's call an emergency situation. Let's buy all the rails that we need, whether we buy it, they buy it, Sumitomo buys it, wherever we can buy it. Let's buy all the rails. Let's declare an emergency situation because this is an emergency that involves public safety. And at this point, let's just buy the rail and have some stocks so that when something breaks, imagine we have one rail spare. Just the other day, there were 3 rails that broke in one day. So what if, imagine one rail and the next batch will come in months. It's impossible. There is an emergency. If I would like to strongly suggest that an emergency be called, that government buy all this rail immediately, either through their resources, through the private sector resources, through wherever, and get this rail back into the system.
Would you agree, Yusek Lotilla? I mean, it's unfortunate your secretary is not here, but he said he has full trust and confidence in you. You think that there's a necessity for this?
Madam Chair, the procurement for the rails is ongoing, but insofar as what is necessary in order to put the system fully operational, we will do everything necessary to do it.
Sir, my question to Mr. Sobrepena, in what you're saying, we have to get all these rails. So the rehabilitation, they'll take out existing ones and replace them already with new ones. Is that what you're
Yes,
trying
Madam
to say?
Chair.
Okay. How much will it affect operations? Will we have to stop operations to do this? No? It can be done at night?
Yes, Madam Chair. In the past, with Sumitomo, we would do this at night when it was non-revenue, when it was not working. When the train was not working, that's when we would change all the rail, not during working hours.
Okay. Well, it seems you have anything else to add before I do a summary on this? Go ahead, sir.
Madam Chair, I would just like to add that when the private sector did this, imagine what EDSA would be today without the MRT. And the private sector put up this system to remove the long queues on EDSA, on the buses before, and we were able to do it. We did it at a return of only 15%, back-ended in 25 years. When government was spending 18% on its borrowings at that time, for the same term of 25 years. It would have been easier for private sector to just have bought ROP bonds at 18%, but we didn't. We invested it in this system because of the benefit it would give Metro Manila, of which we are a part of, and where our developments are part of. And it really pains us to see the system in such disrepair, and that the lines have just moved from the buses are now in the MRT. We built the MRT to remove these lines from the buses and to remove queues from the MRT or EDSA, and now we have the same lines all over again, and even worse, in the MRT system. And this is what pains us as the original developers of the system. Where we are right now, Madam Chair, is we are in the middle of an agreement that has been in existence for now 14 years, under a PPP, as we call it, PPP relationship with government. All we want is for agreements to be honored as the investors who invested their money 15 years ago, 17 years ago, agreements to be honored and followed. If we honor our agreements and follow these agreements, everything will move smoothly and everything will work well. However, that's not how it's happened. Agreements have been overlooked and ignored. And we've been trying to see ways to circumnavigate agreements. If only we could follow agreements, everything would work well. Now, where we are now is an emergency. Private sector is willing to bend backwards, sideways, in whichever way to solve this problem. We can do it. We are willing that government can do it. We are willing that a Metro Pacific can do it, or a Sumitomo can do it. All we want, Madam Chair, for the record as owners, is that the problem be fixed once and for all, and that efficiency and safety be restored in the MRT. And that on behalf of my consortium, we are here to basically bend whichever way to accomplish that goal of safety and efficiency in the MRT. Whether we do it or DOTC does it, we're willing to do it. But please do not ignore agreements that have been in place for 25 years, which is the basis of our relationship with government. That's all, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Well, it's good to hear straight from you that you're willing to bend over backwards to ensure the safety of our passengers and the efficiency of the system. On the other hand, of course, it's one thing to make these verbal pronouncements. We will see how it goes eventually, if it will actually be the case. Mr. Attorney Lutilla, Yusek Lutilla, would you have anything else to add?
Madam Chair, we have to stress the fact that the contract is the law between the parties, and the DOTC stands behind its commitment to honor that contract. And precisely because we are ready to honor that contract, we are trying to follow what remedies there are in the agreement and to see what shortcomings there are in the agreement that should be remedied, Your Honor. But insofar as safety and efficiency of the system, in order to ensure our traveling public of the ability to reach their destination safely, we are 1,000% behind that commitment, Madam Chair, and we will, of course, do everything necessary to live up to that commitment.
That is also quite reassuring. For both of you, you agreed that agreements should be honored and not be overlooked, right? Of course, we're not saying that you believe that the other one is compliant and the other one isn't. I'm just saying that both of you have your own access to grind. You each have your problems with each other, and I don't blame you. I see that this has become confusing through the years. These are a few points that I would like to make before we end this so that it is constructive. Number one, I would like you to submit to me the status of your bidding, the dates for next year for the maintenance providers. Okay, number two, also your bidding for the rails, if this is separate from your maintenance providers. When is this? And if possible, if you will heed the call of not only Mr. Sobrepeña but myself, I believe that this is an emergency issue. If there's a way for us to speed up the process of purchasing the rails so that we can rehabilitate, can you imagine the guilt on our shoulders on us if something happens? Maybe it won't happen. Better if it doesn't happen. So let's see, kasi a normal government process may not be what we may not have the luxury of that at this point. So please give me solutions. Contingency. Number three, I would just like to make an assessment that DOTC made such a poor decision getting the maintenance providers that replaced Sumitomo. I'm not saying Sumitomo is great. In fact, please submit to me if you think Sumitomo didn't do well during their tenure, during their maintenance years. But APT, I'm sorry to say, APT and Global, you make a lot of excuses. I don't blame you. The government is giving you just a year. I don't blame you for that aspect. But you are responsible also for the lives of our passengers. So we can't have an inefficient maintenance provider. And so far, I'm sorry, it points to that. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think that's some pronouncement that the maintenance are actually to blame on this scenario. Matter of fact, it's the maintenance provider. We are the one that provides safety for the riding public on those systems that they had. We provide trains availability. If we don't meet that availability because the trains are not operational for safety, we don't let the trains ride or operate in the wayside on the rails because it has broken rails. In other words, the wayside system, the operational system currently left on a string that currently is going to break down any minute or any hour now, but it's still operational. So those systems we provide to make it operational for the next operating hours. We make sure that it operates, and if it doesn't, we tell the operation not to operate because we have people looking at it and maintaining it. So we actually, maintenance provider does provide safety for the riding public. So if it's not efficient for the system to operate or trains, we stop the operating. So
No,
thank
I
you.
understand, sir. I mean, I don't want to say it's mere luck. Of course, he had some work done with it. That's why we were able to contain the number of the number of victims during that one incident when the train overshot its tracks. But my point is, because of what's happening, the schedule of how many times the train is running, because of all of these problems and the lack of replacement materials like the tracks, that reflects also on your ability to be able to provide your maintenance agreement for the MRT. So I'm saying, sir, there's much to be desired with the type of service that you are providing. We thank you, but I think that this is something that we shouldn't owe you, that our passengers are safe at this point. But we shouldn't rest on our luck, I think, and we should move on. That's why I'm not saying it's all on your your shoulders the burden of it, it's also with the DOTC. So at least next year, we will hand it on to a new provider, a new maintenance provider. If I don't know if you're still allowed to bid, then if you qualify for that, I don't know how that will be justified. But we definitely have to start our bidding process for the maintenance provider. Thank you for your clarification. And yes, I do acknowledge that up until this point, we still have, our passengers have still been safe, but that doesn't, it doesn't seem very promising that it will continue on given all of the other things that we need to fix with the MRT and rehabilitate. Next, I would also like to put it in the record that Mr. Sobrepeña mentioned that there will be an end to the arbitration, and as far as they are concerned, they would like to end this arbitration. So we would like to ask a letter from Mr. De Leon confirming such, and that it will be dropped. So matatapos na, wala nang problema dyan, hopefully. Are we happy with this, or are you worried about it?
With all respect, Madam Chair, precisely because the EVBO is a remedy under the BLT agreement, Madam Chair, we would rather follow that path, Madam Chair, because it's a charted path, Madam Chair.
Which one? The equity value buyout?
The equity value buyout, Madam Chair, is a remedy set out in the BLT agreement, which was triggered by MRTC, Madam Chair.
So what you're saying is you would still rather push for the 54 billion buyout?
Madam Chair, because I think it was inaccurate to characterize the 54 billion as going to DBP and Land Bank. The amount going to DBP and Land Bank is actually 54 billion minus the 6 billion or so going to taxes, and minus also the amount that's going to the other bondholders, Madam Chair.
Okay, sir. You know what? This will be a long discussion, but I would like to say this. But wouldn't it be one problem out of the way if you don't have your arbitration, correct? He's already offering this. He's saying it. Or is it the government now actually pushing for arbitration?
Madam Chair, because for us, at least I'm speaking for myself, Madam Chair. As a legal matter, Madam Chair, I would rather clear out a problem by pursuing it to its logical and ultimate end, rather than going into another course. And a meandering river, Madam Chair, does not create.
So before we get too poetic, sir, with our I understand your point. The logical conclusion, at least, that will be beneficial to your side. But here's the deal. If, for example, you don't have any more arbitration, it still doesn't stop you from pushing for your equity value buyout. You can still do that. Am I not right?
Madam Chair, it is triggered by the arbitration, Madam Chair. It's under the system. It's precisely because they triggered, because the equity value buyout, Madam Chair, is a remedy available only to the owner when government defaults. So if, let's say, we terminate the arbitration, then there will be no possibility anymore for an equity value
Yeah, but
buyout.
you can have a compromise here. Let's say the termination based on the following conditions, that the government will now be given the option to such and such equity value buyout, which Mr. Sobrepeña feels, and I feel, of course, I may not be as knowledgeable as you, but I feel it's a waste because you can secure your remaining 20%. What is stopping you? I mean, I don't think it will leave a sour taste in the mouth if the DBP and the Land Bank is the one hindering you from doing your job. I don't think they will be a hindrance to your operational productivity, right? I mean, even if you don't buy them out, am I correct?
No, Madam Chair. The DBP and the Land Bank will not be a hindrance, Madam Chair. But may I just say, Madam Chair, that in any instance where there is negotiation, then of course it's a quid pro quo, Madam Chair. Meaning to say that even if a party might not have any other rights anymore, they can always ask for something more, even if it's not there, because you want to settle something. That's all,
Well,
Madam Chair.
then have it settled. I mean, somehow fix it, sir.
Madam Chair, in any case, like I mentioned, there is a complainant and a defendant. In this case, the complainant is the private sector because government defaulted, and therefore the remedy was equity value buyout. Now, the default, the breach has been cured. The non-payment, in fact, has been paid. So, as far as we are concerned, we are dropping the case. We want to drop the case. They are the defendant. We are the complainant. It's the first time I've heard where a complainant wants to drop the case and yet the defendant wants to continue the case. And secondly, why does government want to be in default? That will trigger a downgrade on the rating, on the sovereign rating. In order for this to go forward, government must declare itself. And that is the strangest thing. Government wants to declare itself in default so that it can trigger an equity value buyout when in fact the complainant is already dropping the case. This is the most illogical path, if I may add, Attorney Lutilia. The defendant is dropping the case. The complainant wants to continue the case. The defendant is saying there is no more breach. Government is saying no, we're in default. So this is the most ridiculous situation I've ever seen. And I just want this to end. And we just want our company to withdraw the case in arbitration. And if you want to talk about solving this problem, let's just you and us have lunch after this meeting, Attorney Lutilia. Invite the secretary. After lunch, let's finish
No,
it.
I think they're too tired for that. No, I think the secretary also has another pressing issue. But no, I want this. I want this resolved as soon as possible. Not for myself, but I don't mean to babysit you guys. You're old enough, right? But I feel that should somebody, I don't know if we're even allowed, sit in just to bring you together and talk about this, because arbitration is unconventional. It's not a regular courtroom scenario, right? So there are certain things that may go on, but I don't think we should drag it. We should drag on the issue. He's right, sir. I mean, why would the government want to look like we defaulted? Mr. Limcauco, you're going to add something.
Yes, put it simply, ma'am. Under the EVBO, and I'll explain why the government wants to pursue the EVBO. Under the EVBO, when we execute the EVBO, all the equity, all the monthly, yearly equity rental payments will be paid. So we will pay the bondholders 54 billion pesos.
Minus tax
Minus
payments,
tax, all of
etc.
that. And the government will not be paying anything anymore. So the system is now ours and it is clean. If we do not pursue the EVBO and we negotiate with the Sobrepeña group, let us say we negotiate for even 100 pesos to buy their equity. We would pay them 100 pesos for their equity, but still be continuing to pay the equity rental payments. So, ma'am, in the first case, in the EVBO, all we'll pay is the 54B. Under their proposal, we will still pay the 54B plus the 100 pesos for their equity.
I'm not sure about the 100 pesos for their equity, but sir, of course we'll be paying, because if the DPP and Land Bank owns the economic rights, you're paying them. You're basically paying the government. Now, this is what I see. I see that the DOTC wants to collect all the fares already. Maybe that's what it wants, or at least 80% of it if you don't buy the remaining 20%. I'm not sure this is the best route to go. I mean, you can stand pat on that, but then eventually we will have to be able to decide which one is really more which one is more practical for the government or beneficial to the government. You were going to add something, Mr. Sobrepeña.
Yes, Madam Chair. When Yusek Limcauco says we will pay the 54, they're just paying themselves.
Exactly.
Okay, first of all. So that's not. Now, second, there is another method which I would like to propose, and which I tried to do before, and this is called the consensual unwind. Under the consensual unwind, all parties, all bondholders, basically agree to unwind the bond so that there are no more ERPs. This is possible, Madam Chair, by just talking to the bondholders, and just like they have talked to the BP Land Bank, and pay the bonds upfront. And we unwind the entire bonds completely, and that now allows them to basically buy the system from us, since all the bondholders are paid. So, in short, again,
So you're talking about the 80% of DBP Land
Plus
Bank
the
plus the
20
remaining
with the
20%
commercial
of the
banks.
commercial banks.
it's called a consensual unwind, where all bondholders are talked to unwind the bond and to be prepaid so that the ERPs stop. That is the proper way to do it, not through the courts of arbitration, because all parties want to do it.
Okay, sir, the second option to order LBP and DBP to acquire all the remaining securitized notes using the GFI's own funds, this option will not actually touch the budget. I mean, if we ask, let's say,
No.
DBP Land Bank to acquire the remaining, we can also do that, right? But then again, all of your income will still go to DBP Land Bank, which maybe is what you didn't want to happen. Okay, if I have to put myself in the shoes of our commuters, they'll say, bilis na, solusyon na, may gustong bumili. MPIC wants to buy it, give it to them. Okay, to the ones listening, mga kababayan natin, syempre, ayaw na natin kasi maulit ito. With all due respect, Mr. Sobrepeña, I see what you mean. At the time, you're just given a guarantee of 15%, wherein you could, the interest rates at the time were much higher in the 90s. On the other hand, I would like to ask you, point blank, you've actually not lost money here, right? You've made some money with your own initiative because of your ownership.
Madam Chairman, we didn't make money as we envisioned because we were unable to hold on to the bonds because of the Asian crisis that happened. We had to retire debt at 10 cents to the dollar, so we actually didn't make the money envisioned on these bonds. The reason we had development rights such as advertising was to compensate us for the low returns on the train. And again, that also got embroiled in a case, so we didn't make the revenues there either. So the answer to your question is we didn't make money as we envisioned in the project.
But you did make money.
Yes, of course we did, Madam Chair. But
No, I just want to make sure that
Yes,
you're
Madam.
not a victim.
Yes,
Because,
Madam
this
Chair,
the government
absolutely.
is for all. It's
No,
not just
I agree.
for
I agree.
itself.
But not as envisioned, not even the 15%.
And that's the risk that you take as an investor, but at least you have that guarantee that the government paid for some of those debts. And not to
Yes.
mention the Asian crisis also. We're all victims of that somehow.
Yes, Madam Chair.
At least with your earnings, as I said, if you make 1,000 and 500 is paid to your debts, that's still for your benefit. So now I would like to go back to just to clarify this. Naawa pa naman sa DOTC noon si Senator Cheese at sinabi, abay, kayong dinidemanda, dapat tayong dun magdemanda, yung pala ngayon, kayong gustong ipagpatuloy yung demanda. Tama ba ako?
Ma'am, in the arbitration po kasi, it's actually at a stage where you will just have to present the evidence for the amount that's going to be paid, Madam Chair. It's not a case anymore of proving whether government was in default at the time or anything like that. That's we're way past that point, Madam Chair. So it's not as if, because you see po, there are certain things that you gain from an arbitration case. One of the things, Madam Chair, is you see in a negotiated contract, there's always a risk that somebody is going to complain that there was something that was going on that was against the law. And when you have an arbitration award, Madam Chair, there is always that benefit po na there was a court, there was a third party, there was a tribunal that said everything was okay and it was done in accordance with the process. Yun po, that's one of the side benefits po of an equity value.
I see. Okay. Well, the long and short of it is in an arbitration, you can actually win, even if you're the defendant, correct? So this is what you're hoping for, you think. And somebody is raising their hands. Mr. Bondo.
Yeah, Ma'am Chairman, just like to note that I think in an arbitration, there's a difference between arbitration and litigation. That's a court case. The arbitration actually encourages the parties to enter into compromise and settlement. There is nothing in an arbitration case that prevents the parties from voluntarily withdrawing the case and agreeing. And we'd also like to inform the chairman that the status of the arbitration, as reported in the MRTC board, is that it has not yet even started on the issues. It has always been on the consent of MRTC and DOTC suspended because on the argument that MRTC and DOTC are talking. That is what is being presented to the MRTC board.
Okay. Before I give my summary on this, of course, you know where I'm heading is I want you both to talk and spend less money on this. I would like to hear from Ms. Elvie Medina. I mean, commuter protection and welfare, how do you view these proceedings? I mean, what do you think in your observation should we do? You might have a suggestion that might clear our heads.
Madam Chair, I thank your committee because of its very diligent research and also being very, very balanced in the presentation of both parties. And what I've seen in the presentations are all on mechanical and money. However, I wanted sana to see the timeline wherein the timeline when the breakages in the operation happened and the number of passengers, because the stoppage of the operation had been frequent because of the number of passengers that have come up. Plus also because Mr. Sobre Peña had said for the first 3 years, even a Mercedes-Benz, after the third year will have breakdowns. It will not have a very, very big breakdown because the number of passengers will be constant for a private car. So we cannot compare this to a private car. However, in the case of MRT, the number of passengers have terribly increased geometrically. And I wanted also sana for the OTC to look into the possibility of asking why these passengers went up to the MRT. It is not because the number of workers has escalated geometrically. It is because the number of buses had also declined. So in the future, I hope there will be something that would present a timeline. Number of breakages in this year is this much. The number of passengers, average number of passengers was this much. And when did the frequency escalate? So it will also help both the parties. Even the maintenance people can say, meron lang ho yung margin of safety. And because of the weight, that margin of safety had already been overshot. That is a possibility. So yun din po yung tinitignan ko rito. The other thing is that a contract like this with the government and the private sector is also like a marriage. It is dependent on the trust and confidence of both parties with each other.
Wala nga, ma'am eh.
However, kung ikaw naman, babae, at nalaman mong yung iyong partner pala ay mayroon pang kasama na parang naging multi-level marketing na, syempre magdududa ka na, matatakot ka na. Katulad ko po, syempre, commuters kami, nalaman kong ganyan pala, parang multi-level marketing yung ka-wedding nung government, medyo kami rin nagdududa na. Also, on the part po doon sa pagbayad ng lease ng ating I'm very simplistic because hindi naman po kami financial geniuses, Pero, if I bought, for example, a condominium unit, and I'm paying that for 15,000 per month for 25 years. When I go to my developer and say, "Oh, my dad died, and I have this money. Can I pay it? Do I need to pay the amount already and then pay the monthly still, or can I pay the lump sum and let's forget about it, give me the title?" That's how simplistic I look at this. Hindi po kaya pwede na sa terms naman itong ating BOT nito I already can pay you. Can I pay in advance the next 15 years and give me the title and all the entitlements of this train? Yun po yun sa akin lang. Thank you. Again,
Pati
thank you very
advertising
much.
kasama na yan?
Opo, kasi po
Hindi.
yung advertising, hindi, nagulat din kami. Kasi po ako nasa advertising agency. Kapag po meron kaming supplier, we only get 15% commission from the advertiser. Dito pala po iba. Hindi po yung mismong DOTC or company ang kumikita, kundi yung ibang grupo also affiliated with their company. So baliktad po yung nasa akin ng network, ako kumikita ng mas maliit. Parang gano'n yung nakikita namin po.
Napakaganda po ng sinabi ninyo. Pare-pareho po tayo na gusto natin simple talaga ang kaisipan para maintindihan ng mas nakararami. Mr. Sobrepeña, ganun po ba? Pati yung advertising rights ay may pupunta na rin pag sinabi mo yung ownership later on, o iba pa yon?
Yeah. Madam Chair, the advertising rights belong to another company, MRT DevCo, and that was the case because the funders of this project required the transfer of advertising rights to MRT DevCo. Because ibang ano yan. As a matter of fact, Madam Chair,
Pero in 2025, tapos na rin yon.
that goes on for no, the advertising, yes.
In 2025.
Yes, Madam Chair. As a matter of fact, just for your information, we just made a order to bring down all the billboards on EDSA. You know, all those billboards that you see for the so-called advertising, we have had it brought down for
Why?
public safety, Madam Chair.
Okay. So you
So-
still own the advertising rights, but if the government wants to assume that will be a different.
Yes, ma'am. It will also expire in 2025.
So the government can choose to do nothing about it, or
Yeah.
can choose to make an offer based
Yes.
on your assessment.
Madam Chair, I think to answer the question of why there are long queues, just this. Number one, there are not as many trains as there should be moving. So less trains means longer queues. Number two, the trains are not moving as fast as it should. It was designed for 65 kilometers per hour. It is now traveling at 40 kilometers per hour. So it's taking longer. Okay? And then fourth, we have issues from our ticketing machines to our stations, which escalators. All of these contribute to longer queues. So all of these are the reasons why we have these long queues. Now, to the question of pwede bang paikliin, pwede bang bilhin na, and all that, our answer is yes. It's possible. All we need to do is sit down with the OTC and discuss it, and we're willing to discuss it with them.
Sir, about the with regards to the buyout that you were saying, so the amount that you're quoting us more or less is 700 million. The advertising rights not part of it.
Ma'am, the 700, Madam Chair, the 700 million is the value of the asset. That's not what we're asking for. It's far, far, far
It
less.
could be
than
less than that.
Much, much, much less. It's definitely not that,
Okay.
Madam Chair.
I will go back to what Miss Elvie said because I like the very simple analogy on marriage. And I think that's basically it. We have a trust issue on both ends. But I'd like to go back. I am bound to suspend this hearing and not to adjourn it because I feel that we have a lot of questions left to ask. And I would like to monitor this now periodically to make sure that we are not delayed in our deadlines. But I'd like to ask, what's happening to your Dalian order? There was supposed to be a prototype that is supposed to be delivered. Are we pushing through with this order, or is there a problem? Is that an arbitration problem?
Madam Chair, the Dalian is continuing the manufacture of the 48 trains, Madam Chair.
Prototype pa lang.
Ah,
Hindi pa tayo nag-order, correct?
Madam Chair, there will be a prototype that will be delivered in August of next year, Madam Chair, and then the prototype will of course have to be tested on the system, and then if everything is checks out fine, then of course they will now start delivering the trains, Madam Chair.
Hold on. August, if we say yes to the prototype, how long will it take to order?
The testing, Madam Chair, in all likelihood will. Madam Chair, there will be at least 2 months of testing of the prototype, and then when everything checks out fine, then they will deliver 3 LRVs every month from the time that we give the go signal.
How many did you order? Are you planning to order?
48 are on order, Madam Chair.
48?
48 LRVs, Madam Chair.
If I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, part of the problem with ordering from Dalian, you said that there was an arbitration case, right? You couldn't proceed with an order because supposedly MRTC is preventing you from making that order because you wanted to be part of it. Am I not? Am I right?
No, Madam Chair, the so-called TRO only delayed them for 20 days. That was 20 days. That's the only delay it did.
But then they could proceed with it.
They did proceed with it, as a matter of fact. And the only reason we protested was because Dalian has never made such a vehicle before, and the chances of a smooth and exact integration into our system would be suspect. No, we wouldn't be sure if it would work.
If
because
let's
it's a
say,
gimmick, yeah.
if let's say your proposal to take over maintenance, etc., with your very promising proposal, which looks, would you accept this Dalian order, or would you probably suggest to order from another manufacturer?
Ma'am, we're open to the Dalian for so long as it passes the standards, that we're sure that it will be integrated well and it can be safe for the public. We don't mind using the Dalian trains.
Okay, so to wrap this up now, because I'm sure you guys are already quite hungry. No, some of you have, if you could really eat here, I doubt if you could really eat comfortably. What I would like from the DOTC is your continued talks. Okay, number one, I asked you already, I would like the deadlines, your schedule for the biddings, both for the maintenance and for the rails. Okay, Mr. Jose, I saw him nodding. He's going to give me that, right? And then you will also suggest to us if there's an emergency procedure to speed up the process.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, but without sacrificing, of course, the competence of the ones that will be awarded, right, the contract. Number two, next, I would like you to give me also a time frame on where we can actually see improvement on the bathrooms and then the escalators and the elevators. Granted, it will take a total overhaul, but what is your proposal? I will really check on this, that it is clean, because I don't think there's an excuse that it can't be clean. You have to start adding those water tanks so that there's water, because without water, you cannot clean anything. It will be too difficult to clean with all chemicals. So I will check on that. Please give me a time frame where I can see some improvement. Next, you promise that you will be having those awning for the passengers. You may not be able to do it in all stations, but you need to be able to add more if you could. And get a sponsor to lend umbrellas. Couldn't you do that? At least show our passengers that you care, that you have a heart. It will be no expense to you if you have sponsors with an umbrella that says, I don't know, the Sobre Peña Group or something, MPIC. And then I would like you to give me a date. Now I have the number of Secretary Abaya because he called me earlier. I would like you to have a date where you can talk about the following items. Number one, ending arbitration. I don't see any reason why, whether or not it will be a legal victory for one over the other, it's still an arbitration and it will still delay certain processes. So talk about your arbitration. Number two, talk about your proposal for buyouts and ownership. Because before the government spends on something, we have to be sure that it is the best option, that we are not wasting the money of the people. And then talk about the proposal these people are very impatient about, of the private sector to actually take over. I'm not saying that we favor anyone. I think it's too good to be true, honestly, if you ask me. But let's see, what are the strings attached here, if it will actually work, if it will lessen the burden on the government, and it will make them earn a legitimate amount that is equitable, that is not too much. Why not? Let's consider it, because people are impatient. In fact, when you read the papers now, everybody says, ano ba, ibigay na ninyo yan sa private sector. Hindi ninyo yan kaya. But it's not as simple as that. Miss Elvie made a good point, Mr. Sobrepeña. I commend you for having invested in our country, and this is one of the first examples of a build lease transfer agreement, the private-public partnership. But you have had so many other partners. I know this is an option in business that it's so difficult to trace, and it's so difficult now to trust, because wait a minute, if I give you this, if I give you my hand, does it mean that I can trust you, or I still can't rely on you because you have another part to this, like the ownership of the advertisement, etc. So you can't also blame the government for being careful. Would we want to get into an agreement with you in 25 years, since you have that right to first refusal? We don't know. I hope that we can salvage this relationship so that it doesn't leave a sour taste on our mouths, right? And I don't know why you accepted payment from MPIC. It's still not clear to me why they will pay you to be a part of this, when there's clearly, I'm not sure what they will get out of it, and I'm weary about that. Go ahead, sir.
The reason we got Metro Pacific, Madam Chair, is that we have given DOTC 5 proposals previous to this to add trains. The real problem of the system is it was envisioned to have new trains as early as 0203. And we have been proposing to add more trains under the existing BLT agreement. Now, since government has not responded to any of these 5 proposals under the current BLT system, we invited Metro Pacific to submit a proposal on a purely BOT, without sovereign guarantees, without guaranteed payment, a separate proposal, so that perhaps government might find that more acceptable from another group.
But they paid you for doing this, right?
Because they had to use our existing agreement in order to be able to come into the system.
That's exactly what me and Miss Elvie are trying to say. So just for you to be able to give them the point of negotiation using your agreement, parang you sold off again a part of your rights. I mean, I don't know what type of proprietary right you have to this, or what rights you have. So they paid you just to use your name to get into to get into talks with the government. Is that it?
No, Madam Chair, it's not to use our name, but to use our rights as a company, to basically buy into the company so that they could, in fact, propose to the government under a separate scheme, a BOT scheme.
Why didn't they just propose it to the government without having to buy you first? Because you're not sure if the government will accept the offer of MPIC.
Madam Chair, the existing company, MRTC and MRT Holdings, owns all the rights with the system because it built it. So therefore, it owns all the rights. So there's no way for a third party to come in because it's another company who owns all these rights. Now, we were willing to basically work with Metro Pacific, and if necessary, even put in money with them, if it required so. So,
okay.
But under their partnership, and cooperation with them.
So let me ask you, sir. So if this doesn't push through, MPIC will just own a part of your company, but you don't have to pay them back for not having this negotiation push through, right?
Madam Chair, it's envisioned as a cooperation agreement to bring about a solution to the MRT. So
right,
that's
but you can't be sure that the government will actually hire your services or the contractors that you suggest or the suggestion of MPIC. So therefore, there's no guarantee to them, but they paid, they bought in to your company already. Am I correct?
Yes, Madam Chair. And if for any reason government wants to do it itself, for instance, wants to do all the things, then a buyout is possible. wherein MPIC and ourselves and everybody else gets.
So
simply bought out.
will MPIC now, because of their joining into the corporation, will that make the buyout more expensive for the government?
I don't think so, Madam
No,
Chair.
because you're not adding assets, you're just adding a partner, right?
I don't think it will make it any more expensive.
That's why I'm just worried about it. And Miss Elvie and I are probably thinking along the same lines of trust. See, you get more people in without really a guarantee. How is that possible? No one is altruistic enough to get into it. And I think that maybe you might be overextending also yourself.
Yeah, Madam Chair, the MPIC proposal carries with it a projected return of anywhere from 13 to 15% return.
That's if the government...
Yes, and
Yes,
if it
but-
doesn't, then I think government, because there is a live agreement, should just buy out private sector directly, without equity value buyout, without any of that. Just make an offer to private sector and they can take over the entire system.
But it didn't make it more expensive to the government to buy you out with MPIC's
No, Madam Chair.
entry, right?
No, Madam Chair,
No,
it won't.
okay. It just probably lessened the okay. So all of these, I already mentioned what we need, and I want also, so the bathrooms, the escalator, elevator schedule, and I want you to meet and discuss. Please give me a tentative time when you're going to meet. I know it's going to be the holidays, but something quick maybe, so you can hit the ground running next year, because this is a safety issue. Maybe like 30 minutes. Let's talk about this. The contingency issue for the bidding, in case that we feel that the bidding process might take too long. So again, this is a trust issue, and I would like to reiterate that in my position, my main concern is the safety of the public, but it is also my concern to make sure that we are all doing our jobs. I mean, the OTC are doing your job, and it is also my concern, our concern as oversight, to make sure that the government does not get the short end of the deal, that whoever we have an agreement with, that the money of the paying public is not actually going to waste. Pera ng bayan ang dapat nating bantayan dito, pati na rin ang kaligtasan ng ating mga kababayan. So with that, I will now suspend this hearing until such notice where we can have perhaps the Secretary present as well as Mr. De Leon. But again, let me remind the group of Mr. De Leon to submit their views on the arbitration. So thank you for your time. Happy holidays. Maligayang Pasko po sa inyong lahat.
Thank you very much.